Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep by AS. A very warm good evening to everyone. I hope all of you are doing absolutely fine. I welcome you all to today's class of governance. This is class number 6. I hope all of you are doing good. We'll wait for a couple of minutes. Let everyone join in the class and then we will begin. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Hello, Arnab. Good evening, Karthik. I'm good, thank you. Hello, Mohan. Good evening, Vivek. Hello, Purvi. Good evening. Hi, Sulakshna. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Vaitri. You filled up the form? Great. Congrats. Now on to the next big step, the preparation. Good evening, Mustaba. Good evening, Hema. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Akshada. Good evening. Hello, Abhijit. Good evening. Hello, Jyoti. Good evening. Good evening, Veera. Good evening, Sakshi. Good evening. Hello, Kamal Pal. Good evening. So, Lakshna is saying, can I skip newspaper from now onwards and do monthly current affairs for prelims 2024 as I read the newspaper daily? I guess so, yes. If you are comfortable with it and if you are sure enough that you will be able to cover the monthly current affair magazine, you can do that. Hello, Parveen. Good evening. Hello, Samiksha. Hello, Purvi. Hello, Hema. Hema is saying, what is the difference between administration and governance? So, Hema, usually the decisions taken by bureaucrats, the IAS officers, etc., that will be called administration. Decisions taken by the government, the politicians, you can call that as governance. That is basically the two different topics. So, governance would be passing of the laws, what are types of laws that are being done, and administration is mostly implementation part of those laws. Good evening, Vaishna. Hello, Vikram. Good evening. All right. Should we begin? Should we begin then? Okay. So you can all see in front of your screen the topic that we have for today's module. This is module number 6, and the topic that we have taken up for this module is the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, also known as the Second ARC. Now, if you talk to any of the ex aspirants of UPSC, anyone who has prepared for UPSC in the past, anyone who has cleared the UPSC exam, all of them will tell you that reading the recommendations of second ARC is extremely important. Everyone will tell you its importance, but the problem is how exactly do we read it? Because it's such a huge text. There are 15 reports that have been written. All the reports are hundreds of pages. So how do you read all that text? That becomes extremely difficult. Now, what we will be doing in this particular class is we will be discussing some of the most important and relevant recommendations that the ARC has given in its different reports on various topics. Some of these recommendations we have already discussed as and when the topic came up. For example, if you remember, we discussed the second ARC's recommendation on RTI, how to improve the law. We even discussed about the second ARC's recommendation, the Citizens Charter, how to improve that. But beyond that, we'll also be discussing some of the other things that the second ARC has said. Now, a few things to understand here. Number one, it is very unlikely that the UPSC will directly ask you what were the recommendations of the second ARC. So, UPSC mostly will not ask you what were the recommendations. UPSC will ask you a generic question. On the basis of your question, the suggestions that you would have to write, the answer that you would have to write, in those answers, you can quote the recommendations of the second ARC, mainly in the form of suggestions. Whenever the question is for, and we'll be discussing those. For example, if the question is about reforms in the civil services, You can quote what exactly is it that the second ARC has said on this topic. If the question is on how is India prepared to manage natural disasters, how can we improve our response to natural disasters in India, you can quote what the second ARC has suggested. If there's a question on how to improve ethics in governance, you can quote what the second ARC has said. This is where the second ARC recommendations become important. So, number one, you will not be asked this directly. Very, very rarely would it happen. And secondly, it's important in the form of recommendations. Third point, this topic is not relevant for the prelims examination at all. In the prelims examination, you should not expect any question from this part. These recommendations are mainly valid for the mains examination, because that is where you will see all these questions. Now, someone has asked me, is there a first ARC also? Yashi, there was a first ARC in 1960s. So that is not relevant for us. In 1960s, there was first Administrative Reforms Commission that was formed. What recommendation they gave, obviously that's not important because that's so far back. So we are focused mostly on the second ARC recommendations. So Rakshana is saying for PubAd optional first, second ARC reports are important. So Rakshana, as I said, first ARC report is not important for anything now. How can something 60 years old be important now? So second ARC is important, yes, not the first ARC. So the second ARC, this is how it looked like. Second ARC was formed in the year 2005. Virappa Moily was the chairman of the second ARC. Virappa Moily, a Congress member, he used to be the environment minister as well for some time in the Manmohan Singh government. Government of India made the ARC. There is no constitutional provision for this. Please understand, nothing about the ARC is written in any law. This is just one of those commissions that the governments make from time to time to suggest them of how to improve the quality of governance. So in 2005, they were created. The task that they were given was simple: suggest to the government how to improve India's administration, suggest important reforms in the in administration, how to improve the country's governance, how to improve the decision making process, so on and so forth. In total, they gave 15 reports, 1 5. They were given, or they gave 15 reports. These were the title of the reports. The first report they submitted was titled RTI, Right to Information. Second report was Unlocking Human Capital. Third report was Crisis Management. Fourth report was Ethics and Governance. Number 5 was Public Law and Order. Number 6, Local Government. Number 7, they gave a report on capacity building for conflict resolution. Then number 8, they gave a report on how to combat terrorism. Number 9, social capital. Number 10, refurbishing personal administration, where they talked about rebranding the UPSC exam, the changes in the UPSC exam that are required. Number 11, e-governance. Number 12, citizen-centric administration. 13, the organizational structure that the government should have. 14, financial management system. And 15, state and district administration. These are the 15 reports that they gave. Will we be discussing all the 15? No, we are not going to be discussing all the 15, but majority of these will be discussed. And from those, we have taken up the most important pointers. For example, we'll be discussing what the ARTI report said, ethics and governance, unlocking human capital. We'll be discussing the local governance report, conflict resolution report also we'll be discussing. Then we'll also be discussing about refurbishing of administration. Then we'll be discussing citizen-centric administration and some other parts of the report, structure of the government, state district administration. So most of these will be discussed as we go forward. So let's start with the first one. The first report that they gave was a report based on RTI, that is right to information. Now, RTI is a topic that we have discussed in detail. It was a part of our very first class in governance. If you did not watch that class, I would highly recommend you to watch the recorded version of it. We discussed about these recommendations in the RTI class also, but we'll repeat these here as well. The first big recommendation that was given was number 1, repeal the Official Secrets Act. Remember, we discussed about the Official Secrets Act 1923. We discussed how this particular act is a stumbling block to the people's right to information. What happens is, whenever, let's assume you ask for any information from the government, you file an RTI. If the government does not want to share that information with you, if the government wants to hide the information from you, what they will do is they will say it is an official secret. And since it's an official secret, we cannot share this information for you. We discussed how this particular law was actually passed in the British era, that is in 1923. This law should be repealed as per the ARC, but the government has not done that. You will see most of the recommendations of the ARC have not really been accepted by the government. Usually, that is the case with most of the governments. The governments usually only handpick, cherry pick those recommendations that they think will suit them. Just because a commission or a committee has recommended something does not really mean the government will accept it. The government chooses whichever recommendations they think will suit their purpose, will suit their narrative, they will accept those recommendations, and the other ones are let go of. That is how usually the governments actually respond. Apart from that, some other interesting recommendations were given. Second ARC suggested government should spend at least 1% fund from flagship government programs to update the records. Now, this is interesting. Flagship government program mean the main government schemes. For example, let's say Manrega. Let's say the food security program. Let's assume Ayushman Bharat. So the recommendation is whatever the government gives as a budget for these schemes, 1% of that should be taken out and should be used to update the government records. Now, if you remember when we were discussing RTI, we discussed one of the problems in the RTI law is the government departments right now do not have most of their records in digital form. You go to government departments, there are files stacked one over the other, and you are not really able to fetch information that you want. And that is why, even when the government employees or a government servant would want to share information with you, they will not be able to share the information. The reason is simple, that they just don't have that information with them in the digital form. The reason is the reason is all this requires money. You cannot just randomly have information given out. If you want to update the records, make them computerized, convert them into electronic form, it all requires certain amount of money. Now the problem here is 1% of big government schemes can actually be a lot of money. Let's take a simple example. If you look at on an average how much government spends on Manrega, on an average, if you look at the Manrega scheme, let's assume government spends, let's assume 80,000 crore on Manrega. Now, even 1% of this, that means 800 crore. So, this is not a small amount by any stretch of imagination. So, when you say that the government should at least park 1% of the money from the scheme to do this or to update the records, that still means the government has to actually spend quite a bit of money. So, are you ready for that? Would the government think that this is the best use of the money? Not really. So, government has not taken that recommendation as well, because they think that 1% of our big schemes is still a lot of money, and we cannot really do this, or we cannot really spend it just to update the records. Next recommendation that they gave, at least half of information commissioners should be from non civil service background. Let me remind you, when we studied about the Central Information Commission, we discussed there will be one chief information commissioner and maximum 10 information commissioners. Remember? Although there are almost never 10 information commissioners, but this is what the law is. The problem with this law is most of these are civil servants, most of these are people who have been working with the government for a long time. So the ARC says that it is difficult to expect them to be neutral. Most of them would favor the government anyway because they have been working with the government. So the recommendation is at least half of the information commissioners, if not more, at least half should be from non-civil services background. Again, a recommendation which the government has not given any attention to. Next recommendation, have clear provisions to include NGOs. Again, let me remind you, when we discuss about who are included or who are covered under the RTI law, there is no clarity on the NGOs because it says substantially financed NGOs. The law says substantially financed NGOs. There is no clear definition of substantially financed. No one knows what do you mean by substantially financed. Is it 1 crore, 10 crore, any other amount? So the recommendation is to have very clear cut provisions which NGOs are included, which NGOs are not included. Have independent authority for grievance redressal. Grievance redressal means if you have a complaint, where do you go? I'm sorry. If you have a complaint, where do you go? So right now the provision is, if your RTI is not responded to, first appeal that you make will go to the same department, to a senior officer, senior of the PIO. Second appeal, as you know, goes to the Information Commission. Here, the recommendation is have an independent authority, because right now the problem is even the information commissioners are under the government only, because at the end of the day, they are civil servants. They are appointed by the government only. So, how much power would a civil servant of the government have to actually ask the government to share some information? That is problematic. Right now, as per the law, if the Information Commission tells the government on the second appeal that you have to share this information, and if the government still does not do that, there is nothing that the Information Commission can do. Let me repeat. If the Information Commission asks the government to share the information with the person on the RTI, but the government still denies it, there is nothing that the Information Commission can do. That is a big problem here. The Information Commission has not been given the power to take action against the government if the government is not accepting their orders. Because at the end of the day, it is not an independent body. It's a body that works within the government. It's a body that is appointed by a government procedure. It's a body that majorly comprises of civil servants only. So the recommendation is, why not have an independent body, people who are not really a part of the government, so that they can take their actions independently. Then have a roadmap to cover parliament and judiciary under RTI as well. Now this is partially done. If you remember, we had discussed the office of the Chief Justice of India is under RTI now. Although there is no clarity what kind of questions can you ask. But ex-Chief Justice of India, Ranjan Gogoi, before his retirement, he had passed an order saying that the office of the Chief Justice of India will be under RTI. So that is partially done, but there is still no clarity over what kind of questions can you ask, what kind of information can you ask for, and would it be replied or not. Non-confidential files should be made public under RTI. I told you earlier as well, in the US, there is a law that if the government calls a file confidential, after 50 years, it is automatically brought out in the public. So in the US, if the file or if any matter is called confidential, once 50 years pass, sorry, it will automatically come in the public domain. People can read it. In India, there is no such provision. Unless the government specifically says that now this file is non-classified, the file will not come in the open. So the suggestion is, Why are you waiting for the people to ask for information? The government itself should be proactive. Whatever files are non confidential, they should already be in the public domain. Why should a person even have to spend 10 rupees to ask for information from the government? 10 rupees may not be a large sum, but it is still an inconvenience. Why are you asking people to spend even 10 rupees for that? The government should be proactive enough to give out whatever information is non confidential rather than waiting for the people to ask for this information. These were the recommendations on the RTI file. The main recommendations, that this is how the RTI law will improve, this is how the RTI law will become better. The second report that we will be discussing from RTI, or from second ARC rather, is unlocking human capital. Now, what do you mean by unlocking human capital? In simple terms, the idea of unlocking human capital is to get the best out of the government resources, to not increase the size of the government, rather increase the efficiency of the government. The similar concept as we discussed, minimum government, maximum governance. First, rationalize the size of the government. Now, this is where you have to understand something. Right now, there is a limit on how many ministers there can be. What is that limit? I'm sure all of you know this. What is the maximum limit on number of ministers that we can have in the central government? Guys, when you say 15%, 15% of what? 15% of 1 million, 15% of our population, 15% of the of Chinese population. When you say 15%, do you think it's the right answer? The UPSC form is out. At least now you have to get your answers right. 15% of what? 15% of family members that I have. 15% of what? 50% of India's constitution or India's population. It can be anything, right? Okay, I'll see. 15%. Vaishna is correct. Dhanya is correct. Jia is correct. Chituri is correct. These are the only people who are correct right now. Others have mistaken. See, a lot of people are saying 15% of parliament, which is absolutely wrong. Not 15% of parliament. 15% of Lok Sabha. 15% of Lok Sabha. Not the 15% of parliament. Parliament includes Rajya Sabha as well. So 15% of Lok Sabha. Now, please understand, there is a very interesting loophole here. There's an interesting loophole here. The loophole is the limit that has been set. And by the way, let me ask you one more question. This limit was introduced by which constitutional amendment? Which constitutional amendment was it that introduced this limit? Okay, Abhijit, Jia, Dutkul, Kumkum is also right. Vaishna is also right. Deep Shikha, Karthik, these people are right so far. Yes, Dhanya is also right. Aniket is also right. 91st Amendment, 2003. So 91st Amendment 2003, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a prime minister. This is when they had introduced this. Now, please understand, there is a very interesting loophole here. The loophole is there is a limit on the number of ministers, but not a limit on the number of ministries. There's a difference between the two. The number of ministers that you can have is 15% of Lok Sabha, fine. But the number of ministries that you can have is still, there is no limit. So under one minister, you can still have 10 ministries. So you are still delaying the process of decision making. The more the ministries, the more the departments, more is the delay in decision making processes. So you are putting a limit only on the number of ministers and not on the number of ministries. That becomes problematic. So when the ARC says rationalize the size of the government, they mean to say don't just put a limit on the number of ministers, but also number of ministries. Also, there is one important tip here for you for your examination purposes. Rationalize is a very interesting word here. look at the choice of words that ARC is saying. Rationalize is a very interesting word. Rationalize doesn't mean increase, it doesn't mean decrease. It means just to have the appropriate level. So, for example, when you say government's size should be rationalized, what you mean to say is if there is a requirement of more people, then more people should be employed. If there's a requirement of lesser number of people, then lesser people should be deployed. Simple, full stop. You are not saying increase or decrease the number. You are just saying rationalize. That means have the number of people who are appropriately required to do this job. That means rationalize. So again, these choice of words are very interesting. In your answer writing as well, whenever you have to basically write your opinion, when you try to take a middle path in anything, use these kind of words that we should rationalize our choice, we should take rational decisions. These kind of words are extremely important. Then they also recommended recasting allocation of business rules. Now, what do you mean by this? The idea is the way that the government works right now, it's a slow process. If you apply for any permission with the government, for example, if you have to open up a factory, you require tens of different permissions. Environment Ministry, Labor Authority, Agriculture Ministry if you're taking agricultural land, or Tribal Ministry may come in if you're taking the tribal land. Corporate Affairs Ministry will come in. So a lot of ministries will come in one by one, and they will actually take these files one by one. The file will first go to one ministry. They will say yes, 10-15 days will pass. Then it will go to second ministry, and again 10-15 days will be passed, because that is how the business of the government is conducted. So the recommendation is to change that and apply something called a single window clearance. You would have heard this phrase multiple times. Single window clearance. Have you heard of this? Single window clearance. So those who have not heard of it, single window clearance means, for example, if I am to open up a factory, I submit a file at one place. All the ministries, all the department, their representatives should come at that one place, sign the file, and get it done. Rather than actually me trying to move the file from here to second place to third place to fourth place, rather than doing that, it's always better to have one single place where most of the permissions can be given. Most of the Western countries have that. I'll give you an example. So one of my very close friends lives in the US, lives in Chicago, and he basically showed me. We were on a call or video call, just kidding about how it is easier to do business in the US. And he showed me within 30 minutes you can open up a company in the US. So basically, there's a website. You finalize, you give them all the details, submit the documents. Within 30 minutes, you will get the email that this is your registration certificate, good to go, start your business from tomorrow. Now, I'm not saying overnight India will turn into that kind of a country. That's not possible. Our scale is different, our problems are different. The good thing is, many states are doing this. Many states are trying to now give a push to entrepreneurship. As Vivek says in the chat, Telangana did it. Many other states are doing this now. Many other states are trying to give a push to people who are entrepreneurs. But again, at the overall central government level, especially, it still needs a lot of time. Also, simplify the government processes. The same thing as we discussed. Simplify, make it easier for people to apply. And overlapping jurisdiction should be checked. Now, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by overlapping jurisdiction? I'll give you a simple idea. So, we have a Ministry of Tribal Affairs. We have a Ministry of Panchayati Raj. And we also have a Ministry of Rural Development. Now, imagine there is a government scheme specifically for rural areas where there is tribal population, where the panchayat has also been made under PESA Act. There's a government scheme in a rural area where there's panchayat, there's a tribal population, so the panchayat under the PISA Act. Now the fighting amongst the ministries is who will implement that scheme, because every ministry wants to implement the scheme. See, the idea is simple. Everyone wants to become a minister in India. When you become a member of the parliament, no one is satisfied. All the members of the parliament want to go one step ahead. All the members of the parliament want to eventually become a minister. Why? Only when you become minister that you get real power. For example, if you are the minister of tribal affairs, that means the government budget for your ministry will be under your jurisdiction. You will decide how to spend that money, where to allocate that money, which government scheme will be given a priority, so on and so forth. Similarly, when you are the Minister of Rural Development, so you will be the one who will be looking into all the budget allocation for rural development. So everyone wants to be the minister, and every minister wants that the schemes should be under them. I'll give you another example, and do your research. Before this government, so right now, since 2014, we have a government which has single party majority, almost single party majority. Before this, for 30-35 years in India's history, we did not have a one party government. Since 1980s till 2014, we did not have a one party government. We always had a coalition government, means multiple parties coming together to form a government. Now, and you can research this on your own, whenever we had a coalition government, when a smaller party comes and says, okay, I will support you, but they want something in return, you will notice this. Whenever they say, I want something in return, usually it is always the railway ministry. Usually, always the railway ministry. How do I say this? Before 2014, just take a look at the list of railway ministers of India. You will realize what I'm talking about. Look at the list of railway ministers in India. Nitish Kumar, not a part of BJP, not a part of Congress. Lalu Prasad Yadav, not a part of BJP, not a part of Congress. Mukul Rastogi, not a part of BJP, not a part of Congress. Mamta Banerjee, not a part of BJP, not a part of Congress. All these, none of these are part of BJP or Congress. So they were never a part of the government. They were just a part of the smaller party who was supporting the government, and they wanted railway ministry in return. Now the question is why? The answer simply is this. Railway ministry has a huge budget. Railway ministry has a huge budget. So even if you sprinkle 1%, 0.5% here and there on you, you actually get a lot of money out of it. Now, I am not putting, I am not blaming anyone. I am not putting any allegations, but this is a reality, and you will see the trend. You will see the trend that whenever there are coalition governments, the party who supports you will always say, I want the railway ministry no matter what. Because again, railway ministry has a lot of power, lot of budget given to it, and also not just the budget. See, I'll tell you, and this is how politics works. Which minister has a potential to earn a lot of money? Which minister has a potential to earn a lot of money? I don't want names. I'm just asking you which ministry has a potential to earn a lot of money. The simple answer is the ministry that gives out contracts will always have the highest potential. The ministry that gives out contract, that I will give you a contract, you do this for me. I'll give you a contract, because the companies who want these contracts of thousands of crores of rupees, they will say, sir, I'm giving you a scratch card. You scratch it, I'll give you some cash back in return. So that cashback itself is a lot. So the ministries which usually award a lot of contracts will always be very, very, very high potential. And that is why everyone wants to be their minister. Railways, then you have infrastructure related. So, for example, highway construction, etc. They will also be always in a lot of demand, because they are the ones who give a lot of contract. Home ministry, lot of contracts, because police comes under it, so they have a lot of contracts. So again, ministry that have a lot of potential of giving out contracts will always earn a lot of money. So again, come back to where we were. So the point that we were discussing is there are so many ministries, and there's an overlapping of those ministries right now. This is just one example of multiple ministries looking into the same kind of an area. Why can't rural development ministry handle most of it? They can, but then you want to satisfy more people, you want to make other ministers as well, so you do that. I'll give you one more example. So in India, we have a minister for civil aviation, we have a minister for shipping, we have a minister for railways, we have a minister for road, etc. This is all the ministry that we have. In US, there is only one transport secretary, just that. US or UK just have one transport secretary. Their secretary is minister only. This is how US or UK operate. Only one person handling each and every aspect of this, because all of this comes under transport. In India, we have divided that, segregated that. Now, the reason for India to do that is maybe we believe that this will put much more focus, or it will give a much more undivided attention on one sector. But the problem is, because of this, you are segregating a lot of functions. You are segregating a lot of them. I'll give you one more example. When Indira Gandhi was the prime minister, you know how in national newspapers you have very interesting cartoons, satire cartoons that are published usually. So at the time of Indira Gandhi, when she was the prime minister, there was a very interesting satire cartoon that was published, and that cartoon was that there is an IAS officer, and someone is asking him, "What is your post? What do you do?" So he says, "I am the Director General of the Department of Putting Glue on the envelope that will go to the post office." So he said, "I'm the Director General of the Department of Post that is responsible for putting glue on the envelope that will go to the post office." What is what does that mean? What that means is government has divided functions in such a way that, for example, if the government has to post a letter, okay, first officer will buy the paper, second officer will buy the pen, third officer will write, fourth officer will fold the letter, fifth officer will put it in the envelope, sixth officer will put the glue, seventh officer will put the stamp, and eighth officer will go and post it. So to write a letter and post it in the government, there are eight people who are required. Even if one of them is absent, the letter will not be sent, because why would anyone else do the other person's job? That is a problem that we have, or we used to have with the government majorly, that you have segregated the functions so much that one single job will all be left incomplete just because one of the people is absent. If one of the people is absent, that is good enough to stop the entire machine. That is a big problem. So that should not happen. And this is why the suggestion is, don't have overlapping ministries, overlapping agencies. We have already studied one example of it. We have studied how Lokpal and CVC have a lot of similarities. If you say that, okay, Lokpal has wider powers than CVC, then remove the CVC altogether. If the argument is that, oh no, Lokpal has more powers, then the answer should be, then remove the CVC altogether. Why do you need to have two bodies? So there is a lot of these agencies that have an overlapping jurisdiction, which is what the second ARC suggested that should be removed, but it has not been done so far. Next report, ethics in governance. This report particularly is important for your GS4 paper as well, which is the ethics paper. You can write recommendations there as well. Now, this is extremely interesting. It has a lot of interesting recommendations. This is mainly recommendations regarding politics. First, partial state funding of elections. Now, what exactly is a partial state funding of elections? The simple idea is, in order to fight elections in India, it's an extremely, extremely expensive exercise. You just saw the Supreme Court strike down the electoral bond scheme. Now, and we will discuss about that in a bit later when we come to that idea about electoral bond and political funding, etc. But if you actually see the political funding that the parties require in such huge numbers, the reason is simple, that fighting elections is a very, very, very expensive exercise. Only those who have enough money of their own, only those who have a solid financial background can actually fight elections. Apart from that, fighting election is very, very, very difficult. So the idea is, why not create an even playing field? Why not have a provision that the government will help you with fighting elections? Many governments or many countries around the world have this provision that if you fight elections, if you want to fight elections, the government will help you with funding. Now, how can that work? The good part with this will be that even the people who don't have money will be able to fight election, because understand this idea. Let's assume I am highly educated, I want to work for the betterment of the society, I don't want any money, but I want to fight elections. But how will people come to know about me? In order to tell the people about me, I have to spend a lot of money giving ads, holding rallies, printing posters, getting all that money arranged will be very, very difficult. That is why you will not see a lot of common people enter politics, because it costs a lot of money. So the idea is, if you have to really open up politics, you have to allow partial funding of election. Now, the problem is here, how do you allow partial funding? Because the problem in India is, see, when you have a two-party system, that means only two parties are allowed. There are only two candidates. You can fund them. You can give both of them one crore rupees each, and you can say, "This is your money. You go and fight elections." But in India, there is no limit on how many people can fight elections. And tomorrow, if the government announces that, okay, we will give you fund for fighting election, then everyone would want to fight elections. That's how Indians are, right? Tomorrow, if the government tells you, we will give you 1 crore rupees if you want to fight election, then everyone will say, oh, now I will also fight election. I will also fight election, because that is how we think that our idea, or that our luck might have it, we might be able to convert that just because we get the government funds. So this is not a very good idea, to actually have the government allow money to the political parties. So where is the middle line here? What exactly can be done? Now, in this case, what exactly can be done is, number one, you can't give fund to all political parties, you have to limit it. So limit can be done, for example, funding only for recognized parties. Funding, for example, only for recognized parties. In Indian polity, have you read the difference between recognized and non-recognized parties? I hope all of you know the difference between recognized and non-recognized parties. Okay. Recognized parties are national recognized, state recognized parties. In order to become a recognized party, you have to get certain minimum number of votes, certain minimum number of seats. Only then you become a recognized party. So one suggestion can be funding only for recognized parties. Second, not cash funding, but funding in kind. For example, rather than the government saying, okay, we'll give you cash, government will say, okay, we will give you 100 liters of petrol, or we will give you a government venue for holding your rally, something like that. That can be something that can be implemented by the government, because that will not just open up politics to common people, allowing other people to come and fight election, but also reduce the problem of political funding and black money. The reason that political parties want and require so much money is that fighting elections is extremely expensive. And when that becomes less expensive, or they know the government is helping them, it will automatically reduce the requirement of this election funding, and that will become better. Second suggestion that they have in this report: tighten the anti-defection law by letting the governor and the president decide. Now, I'm sure all of you are very well aware of the anti-defection law. Anyone who does not know what the anti-defection law? Anyone who has no idea about the anti-defection law? So all of you know this, right? Written in the 10th schedule, it simply says, if you change your political parties, you will be disqualified. That is a simple idea of the anti-defection law. The problem in the anti-defection law is that the decision is taken by the presiding officer. So either the Speaker of the Lok Sabha decides or the Rajya Sabha chairperson decides. Now, this is a big problem. Just take a simple example, and everyone is referring to what is happening in Maharashtra. You can take very simple example. Let's assume in the parliament today, considering the present scenario, what are the chances? Would someone from Congress want to go to the BJP, or would someone from BJP want to come to the Congress? What do you think? What is more likely to happen? Someone going to BJP or someone leaving BJP? What do you think is more likely to happen considering the current scenario? Right. So, considering the current scenario, it is much more likely people would want to join the BJP and not leave the BJP, right? That is mostly how the current scenario is, because it looks like one side is more powerful, more likely to win as compared to other. So, you would want to go to that side. Now, imagine this situation: a Congress member resigns from Congress, goes to the BJP, ideally should be disqualified from the membership of parliament. But who is going to take the disqualification decision? The Lok Sabha Speaker. And the Lok Sabha Speaker belongs to which party? He's from the BJP only. So why would the Lok Sabha Speaker take a decision to disqualify someone who is coming into his own party? There is a big conflict of interest right here. When you allow the presiding officer to take the decision, presiding officer at the end of the day will belong to the ruling party only. So if someone is joining the ruling party, why would he disqualify them? The same case was seen a few years back in Manipur, where some people, some MLAs, resigned from the opposition party, joined the ruling party. The speaker did not take any decision. The reason is there is no time limit in the law to take a decision. It was so delayed that the people who actually switched the party, they were even made the ministers. Rather than being disqualified, they were given portfolios. It was the Supreme Court that had to intervene, and the Supreme Court said that enough is enough. You cannot just continue like this. That is how the anti-defection law is, that it does not have any time limit. It allows a presiding officer to take the decision, and the presiding officer, more often than not, because he or she is from the ruling party, they will not take the decision against the government, and that becomes a problem. Then amend the disqualification criteria for MPs and MLAs. Now, if you look at the disqualification criteria for MP and MLA, it is obsolete. For example, it has things such as if you are undischarged insolvent, if you're undischarged insolvent. Now, the idea of insolvency is that if you become bankrupt, you are more prone to corruption. If you are bankrupt, there are more chances of you committing corruption, there are more chances of you taking money, so you should be disqualified. But again, this is not proven. This is a very obsolete law. ARC says that this should be changed. They also say false election declaration should lead to disqualification. Now, you would have seen a lot of false declarations in the news. I'll give you one example. In 2014, Smriti Irani fought the elections. Now, when you fight elections, you have to fill this big declaration form in which you have to give all your details, your educational qualification, how much money you own, is there any criminal case against you, everything you have to write. The suggestion is, if someone gives wrong details, if someone gives information that turns out to be untrue, the person should be disqualified. I'll give you an example of Smriti Irani. So, Smriti Irani, in her declaration, had said that she has a degree from the Yale University. So, she said she has a degree from the Yale University. Now, Yale University is one of the premier institutes in the entire world, in the US. Now, when asked that when did you graduate, because Yale University said that they don't have a record of her. So when she was asked the question, when did you graduate from Yale, which degree do you have, her response was that, those 2 3 day online courses that you have, a 2 day 3 day online workshop from Harvard, a 2 day 3 day online workshop from Yale. So her response was that she did something like that. And in response, basically, she had written that she has a degree from Yale. Now, this is problematic because, again, that does not qualify to be a degree. But again, no action really was taken. This is not the only instance. There are many other instances of people not giving correct information in their election declaration form. Usually, the usual trend is that if there is a big politician involved in a case, if there's a well-known politician involved, you will not see election commission taking any action. This is the usual trend that we have seen. The worst action that they can take is, oh, you will not be able to do election campaigning for 2 days or 3 days. Beyond that, election commission usually does not take any action. I'll give you two examples of both the parties now. 2017, there were Gujarat elections. In Gujarat elections, so basically the model code of conduct is, before the entire elections are over, in the middle of elections, you cannot give political interviews. When the elections are still ongoing, you cannot do political interviews. So in 2022, or in 2017 rather, Rahul Gandhi apparently gave an interview. Voting was still going on, but he had given an interview. So there had to be action taken against him. He violated the model code of conduct, but no action was taken against him. I'll give you one more example of opposite side now. 2014 Lok Sabha elections, Prime Minister Modi, when he voted, he was coming out from the election booth and he took a selfie in the election booth showing his party symbol. So he was showing the lotus symbol, he took a selfie inside the election booth. That is also a violation of the model code of conduct. Model code of conduct says you cannot take a photo inside the polling station and you cannot display election symbol like that. In both the cases, no action was taken. Both of these are clear violations of the model code of conduct. But as I said, very, very rarely would you see election commission taking any action against a top level politician of any party. Now, why they don't, I don't know. But that is the usual trend. That is a usual trend that they do not take action when it comes to top level politicians. So here also, the idea is that election commission should be empowered. They should be strict against false declarations. If they think that someone has lied on the election declaration, they should be able to take steps against that particular politician. Remember, a few days back, we had discussed about Nolan principles of public life when we were discussing about prevention of corruption. I remember we discussed this. Remember Nolan principles? I had told you this was a committee formed in UK. Nolan was the head of the committee. He had given 7 principles of public life, or 7 characteristics that every public servant should follow. The second ARC said the same. Second ARC had said that public servants should follow the Nolan principles. So second ARC repeated that Nolan principles should be followed. The Nolan principle that we discussed, and many of you gave me your own short forms of this. Someone said hollow IAS, I think. Someone, Vaishna, said shallow, Shiloh, whatever you want to call it. So these were the principles that Nolan committee had suggested, and the second ARC had also suggested that yes, you should follow the same principles if you are in public life. Now, there are two other important things that the ARC had suggested should change, and one of them has changed slightly. They said that some of the most important offices in the government of India, their appointment is not up to the mark. For example, they talked about CAG and Chief Election Commissioner. In 2005, when the ARC was formed, In 2005, back then when the ARC was formed, they had they at that point of time, for both of these, for CAG and for Chief Election Commissioner, there was no eligibility criteria, there was no proper appointment procedure. President of India could appoint both on the recommendation given by the Prime Minister. Even today, as we discussed a few days back, even today for CAG, we do not have any eligibility criteria. Even today for CAG, we do not have any committee that is formed to recommend the appointment. So far, if you look at what is happening with respect to the CAG, the President of India appoints the CAG on the recommendation of the Prime Minister. With Chief Election Commissioner, something has changed. You would have been keeping a track of it. Few months back, the Supreme Court was hearing a PIL, and the Supreme Court had made a change in the appointment process of the Chief Election Commissioner. Supreme Court had said that there should be a three-member committee, just like the CBI Director Committee, where there should be Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and the Chief Justice of India. But the government changed it. Now, for Chief Election Commissioner, there is an appointment committee, the same as that of the CIC. What is this committee? Prime Minister, Leader of Opposition of the Lok Sabha, and a Cabinet Minister of Prime Minister's choice. So this is a recommendation partially accepted, you can say. Although not because the government wanted to, partially accepted because the Supreme Court took up this matter, and the Supreme Court itself made a three-member committee. The government then had to change it, the government had to bring in their majority, but at least now we do have a appointment procedure, especially for the Chief Election Commissioner. CAG1 is still a matter of concern. It is something that has still not been changed. We already had a long discussion on the CAG's office, how the government of India should fix proper eligibility criteria, should fix a committee for that, which has not been done so far. Not over. The same report also says that the government and the political party should publish and audit their accounts. Very similar to what the Supreme Court said yesterday while striking out the election or electoral bond scheme. The Supreme Court said that the people of the country deserve to know who is funding the political parties before they go to vote. Very similar to this is what ARC had said. ARC had said that the political parties, doesn't matter if they are in power or they are in the opposition, should publish their records. The political parties should know, or the people rather should know, who is giving money to political parties, where are they spending the money, who is the one who is giving the money for the parties to give such huge ads in the paper, so that the common people can decide their vote accordingly. The common people should have the right to decide their vote accordingly rather than just depending upon any information that is available online. Post poll coalitions should not be allowed. What are post poll coalitions? Let me try and explain this to you with respect to what happened in Maharashtra. So, in the last Maharashtra election, there was BJP and Shiv Sena on one side, there was Congress and NCP on the other side. That is how the elections were fought. So basically, these two were team. So if there were 288 seats in Maharashtra, for example, BJP said, okay, we will fight 144 seats. Shiv Sena said, we will fight on 144 seats. So now please understand this. On these 144 seats that Shiv Sena had fought, there was no BJP candidate. BJP had told the voters of these places that if you want us to win, vote for Shiv Sena. They are our brothers only. Again, in these 144 seats, BJP did not have any candidate. BJP told the voters, if you want to vote for us, vote for our partners, Shiv Sena, we are the same party. Now, people who wanted to vote for the BJP, they also voted for Shiv Sena. And now, what happened after elections? This Shiv Sena crosses over and goes to this side. And then a government is formed with these three coming together to form the government. The problem here is if the common people wanted Congress and NCP in the government, they could have voted for them only. The reason why common people would have voted for, let's say, Shiv Sena was because they thought they're on the other side. But after the election, they changed the side. This is an example of post poll coalition. Means you form a group after the results are announced. This is a deceit for the voters. This is something where the voters have been wronged. Rather than doing this, the election or the second ARC says, if let's assume these three parties want to come together, then they should fight elections together once again. If these three parties want to come together, form a government, then these three parties should come together and they should fight the elections together. Without that post poll coalition, without that coalition after the poll should not be allowed. That is what the second ARC said. Chief Election Commissioner appointment, we already discussed, and also reform the collegium system. I'm sure in Indian polity, you all already would have had a lot of discussion about the collegium system. Collegium system, as you know, is used to appoint judges in the higher judiciary. Collegium is the one that recommends to the president about the new appointments in the Supreme Court and in the high courts. This is a system that has been criticized time and time again. This is a system which the government wanted to change, but the Supreme Court did not allow it to change. So the recommendation is also to reform this collegium system. So far, any questions, anything that you have in your mind, let me know before I go ahead. Chituri saying it is against democratic principle, am I right? It is against democratic principle, Chituri, but they are not breaking any law as such. Right now, there's no law that prevents them. Any questions so far? Anything before we go ahead? GI saying even if we increase the number of ministries, people heading those ministries would also be counted under 15% cap for ministers. Yes, GI. 15% cap is for the number of ministers, number of people. How many ministries they handle does not really matter. Shweta is saying collegium system, please. Shweta, you would have read collegium system specifically in the second in Indian polity. Collegium system, as you know, is a system under which Supreme Court judges themselves decide who will be the next Supreme Court judge. So Supreme Court collegium, for example, would be headed by the Chief Justice of India. Then there will be four senior most judges of the Supreme Court. These five together will give recommendation to the president. Government has no role to play in the appointment of the judges in Supreme Court and the High Court. That is the collegium system. Government wants that there should be a role for them as well. This is a system that they want to reform. Vaishna, no specific reforms suggested for collegium. They just said it should be reformed. Chiduri Singh, amend disqualification criteria. Please repeat. So, Chiduri, disqualification criteria for MPs or MLAs is very obsolete. For example, it says if the minister, if the MLA has become bankrupt or insolvent. Now, there is no clear connection between being an insolvent or bankrupt and you are trying to remove him or her from the post. So it should be reformed once again because these are very obsolete laws right now. Okay, so Lakshna, tell him to send me some more if he has some more. Okay, should we go ahead then? Should we go ahead then? Okay. So within this report, the ethics and governance report, they also said that there has to be a code for ministers also. Now, right now, we don't have any special law for ministers. Ministers have special power, but they don't have a special law as such. Second, ARC suggested that the ministers should have some responsibility. Now, please understand this, and this actually is true, and I'll give you some examples also. Look at the first statement. Ministers in the Lok Sabha should keep their role separate as minister and the constituency member. Now, what do you mean by this? I'll give you an example. So, what happened was when Lalu Yadav was the railway minister, usually his tenure was considered as successful. He introduced a lot of new trains. There was a Harvard study also done, and he always told people, see, Harvard is studying me. But one of the bad things that happened when he was the railway minister was all the super fast trains that were going through Bihar were actually made to stop at very, very small stations. So they did not remain super fast at all. See, the idea why trains are called super fast or some trains are super fast is that they don't stop at many stations, they stop at major stations only. So, what he did was to please the people of his state, to please the people of Bihar, he made sure that most of the trains stop even at the small villages and small towns. That deteriorated the condition because he wanted to make his constituents happy. That became a problem. Whoever becomes a railway minister does this. Whichever constituency that they belong to, they will make sure most trains stop at those stations because they will make their people happy. And the same can be seen in other places as well. When some people become civil aviation minister, they will make sure that their particular city has the best airport, their city has a lot of infrastructure. I'll give you another example. If you are from UP, I don't know if there's anyone from UP, and you know about Mulayam Singh Yadav. So Mulayam Singh Yadav, who's no more now, Mulayam Singh Yadav and his family originally belonged to a village called Mainpuri. So Mainpuri is a small village in UP to which originally Mulayam Singh Yadav and his family belong. So because he belonged there, and when he was the chief minister, a lot of money went to Mainpuri. It's a small village, but it has an airstrip where the planes can land. It has a huge festival where brands from all around the country come and advertise. There are huge car showrooms, etc. in Mainpuri. Why? Because the chief minister was from that village. So the problem here is that you will see that the ministers would focus, and I'm not saying it's wrong because at the end of the day, it is development only in some part of the country, but it has to be spread evenly. I'll give you one more example. I'll give you one more example. Where was the World Cup final held? Cricket World Cup final held? Where was the Cricket World Cup final held? No idea? Okay, Ahmedabad. Where was the IPL final held last year? Where was the IPL final held? Again, Ahmedabad. IPL final again was held in Ahmedabad only. Then again, go back. India's first bullet train. India's first bullet train, Mumbai to Ahmedabad. So again, I am not saying it is illegal, but it is actually the concept is that the people are getting an impression that because some people in the position of power belong to a specific constituency, most of the funds are going there. When Xi Jinping came to India, when Xi Jinping came to India about a few years ago, he did not land in Delhi. Do you know where he landed? He landed in Ahmedabad. Now, look at the map of India and China. Look at the map of India and China and imagine someone coming from China, what would be easier for them to land in Delhi or to go over with the entire country and land in Ahmedabad? But he landed in Ahmedabad only. So again, you will see that this is a trend that is seen in most of these cities. And I'm not saying it's with one single party, with every party. Whichever party comes to power does the same kind of a thing. So this is why the suggestion is once someone becomes a minister, the suggestion is once someone becomes a minister, they should not be representing their constituency anymore. Their constituency should be represented by a neutral person so that the minister should focus on the entire country and not just one constituency. Again, it's a very interesting idea, but very difficult to implement. It's an interesting idea, but how will you implement that? That still is not very clear right now. Ministers should not use government resources for their own party. This is true. Most ministers don't. This is in fact illegal also. For example, if the prime minister has to go and give a speech for the BJP, if the prime minister has to go give a speech for the BJP, he does not use the government vehicle, he cannot use the government planes. If he does use government vehicles or government aeroplanes, his party will pay for that. There's a payment that is done for using that vehicle, etc. That is what the second ARC says. Ministers should also uphold the political impartiality of civil services, not ask the civil servants to do anything that will conflict with their duties. This is too ideal to be true. It is much more ideal than what reality is in the world. They are expecting the ministers to be impartial to civil servants, not give any orders that they can't fulfill. But again, this is very difficult for the minister not to do. There should be dedicated units in Chief Minister CM office to receive public complaints against the violation of the code of conduct. So if you have a complaint against any minister, as per this suggestion, you should be able to write specially to the Prime Minister, maybe to the PMO, or if you have a problem with the State Minister, then you should be able to write to the Chief Minister or the CMO's office. Prime Minister or CM should ensure observance of the code of ethics and the code of conduct, so they should look into them. And even in the case of coalition governments, ministers of different parties should observe a code of conduct by the ministers. I'll give you another example. Dhanya is saying, what is code of conduct? So, Dhanya, code of conduct, for example, when you also become an IAS officer, you will get a book or a rule book that is called the code of conduct. Code of conduct simply means the rules that you have to follow, to abide by whenever you are on the government duty. For example, the code of conduct can be how to greet your seniors, how to greet politicians, how to dress, what to wear, what not to wear, can you have an account on social media or not, those kind of things. That's called a code of conduct. It's given to bureaucrats as well. When you become an IAS officer, you will get a book called Code of Conduct, which you will have to abide by. And ministers also do have their own code of conduct. Now, if you look at, for example, the ministers, code of conduct says, I'll give you just one of the points of code of conduct. Code of conduct says that at the beginning of the year, every year in the beginning, they have to give a record of their asset, their loans, etc., to the prime minister. So they will inform the prime minister how much asset do they have, means how much money do they have in their bank account, how much property do they own, etc. They'll have to give a detail of all of that. They'll have to also tell how many loans do they have. Every year they will have to give it to the prime minister. How or why? So that the prime minister can keep a track. Let's say this year beginning, you only have 5 crore rupees. Next year beginning, you say, now sir, I have 500 crore rupees. So something wrong happened in the last year, right? Something wrong happened. So you have to basically, as the code of conduct says, you have to submit that so that the prime minister can keep a track. And by the way, one more thing, every member of parliament, like every MP of the Lok Sabha, has to do the same, submit the same record to the Lok Sabha speaker as well every year. So every single year, in the beginning of the year, every Lok Sabha MP will submit a record to the Lok Sabha speaker about the asset, how much money do they have, how much property do they have, and the liabilities, how much money do they owe to other people, so that they can keep a track of it and they can see if you are in earning a lot more money or if there's a case of disproportionate asset or not. Similarly, second ARC in the same report also said a few things about separation of power. Now, you all know separation of power is a very interesting concept. It simply says there are three arms of the government: executive, legislative, and judiciary. There are three arms of the government: executive, legislative, and judiciary. All of these should have separate powers. Simply, if someone is in the legislative, someone is, let's say, an MP or MLA, they should not hold an executive position also, because that will be against the separation of powers. Now, the second ARC says all offices that take executive decisions and control the public funds should actually be called as office of profit, and no MP MLA should be able to hold this office. Tell me this, in Indian polity, did you read about the concept of office of profit or not? In Indian polity, did you read about the concept of office of profit? Okay. So most of you have read about office of profit. Kamal, no, this info is not open to the public. Okay. So most of you have read about office of profit. I'll just recap this very quickly in case some of you have forgotten or some of you have not attended polity classes. Office of profit simply says that if you already hold a legislative position, like you are an MP or an MLA, along with that, you cannot hold an executive position. So, for example, along with that, you cannot become head of a government company, director of a government company. You cannot hold these two offices simultaneously. So, along with legislative, you cannot hold an executive office. The law also says that the parliament can give exemption to a lot of offices from being called an office of profit. So there are a lot of posts that the parliament has said that they will not be called an office of profit. So there's a lot of confusion with the office of profit thing. The reason is there is no constitutional definition. There is no constitutional definition of what will be called an office of profit and what will not be called an office of profit. There is no constitutional definition. Supreme Court has defined it. The Supreme Court has defined it, but the Constitution has not given any definition as such of office of profit, because of which it actually becomes very debatable. Sometimes it's defined in a different manner, and the parties also define it according to their own convenience. There have been some interesting cases. For example, take the case of Jaya Bachchan. Jaya Bachchan was a member of the Rajya Sabha. When she was a member of the Rajya Sabha, she was very close to the UP government, Mulayam Singh Yadav family. She was offered a post in the UP government. So UP government had a organization for film development. So like UP Film Development Board, UP government made an organization to invite filmmakers to shoot in UP, to have shooting, etc. So UP government asked Jaya Bachchan to become the head of that body. So Jaya Bachchan on one hand was a Rajya Sabha MP. On one hand, she became a head of a UP government body who was responsible for propagating or for inviting people to do film shootings, etc. in UP. Now, there was a case filed against her, there was a complaint against her that she's holding an office of profit under UP government. Her defense was that I'm not taking any salary. She said that no, I don't take any salary, so I should not be considered as someone who's holding an office of profit. But the Supreme Court did not agree to this argument. The Supreme Court said, number one, if someone else would have held this position instead of you, would that person have been taking a salary or not? If there was someone else in your place, then would the government have given them the salary? Answer is yes. Second, does the government has the power to remove you from the post? And did the government only appoint you? The answer is yes. Government appointed her. Government could remove her as well. So all these things considered, it was considered as an office of profit. She had to leave her post of the Rajya Sabha MP. So second ARC here wants to give a clear-cut definition of what is an office of profit. The second ARC says if there is any executive body that has the power to spend government money, give government contracts, all of that will be called an office of profit. And people who are MPs and MLAs should not be allowed to hold these offices. Apart from that, if there is a member of parliament who is a head of an organization like planning commission, etc., because he is a minister, then it is fine. If a member of parliament is a minister, and because you are a minister, you are a part of an organization, then that is fine. But especially because you are a member of parliament, you are specially given a separate post altogether, that is wrong. This is what the second ARC says, that there should be a clear cut definition of the office of profit. If there are ministers who are holding another office automatically, then that is fine. But apart from that, an MP or MLA should not be given any office which has the power to spend government money, which has the power to give out government contracts. Also, they said that MP LED schemes or MLA LED schemes should be abolished. Do you know what these schemes are? Have you heard of these? Have you heard of these schemes? I'm sure you would have heard of this at least. Okay. Local area development scheme. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Okay. So I'll tell you what this is. So basically, those who don't know this, I'll tell you. So this was a scheme that was started in 1993. So basically, in 1993, a scheme was started basically to ensure development in the constituencies across the entire country, to give some power to the MPs. So, for example, what happens is members of parliament, each member of parliament gets 5 crore rupees. It's a two installment thing. So they, in first installment they get 2.5 crore rupees, and in the second installment they again get 2.5 crore rupees. So what they will do is, and this is every year, by the way, not in 5 years, every year they get 5 crore rupees, one 2.5 crore, and then again 2.5 crore. What happens is, with this money they can sanction some development schemes in their area. So infrastructure development, etc., can be done. Now please understand, they can only recommend the scheme. The final decision is taken by the district collector. It is the district collector, the district authorities, they will finally decide the scheme, whether the money is to be spent there or not. MPs can only suggest that we want the money to be spent in this scheme. It can be building of roads, can be building of school, can be building of, let's say, wastage segregation plant, whatever they decide. Now, the problem is, despite spending so much money, now please understand, every year 5 crore rupees, it's not a small amount. If you're giving 5 crore rupees every year, this is not a small amount. But if you look at the development that we have had, it is not really in line with the amount of money spent. It's not proportional to that. Do you see that? If your MP is getting 5 crore every year for development purposes, and you still don't even have proper roads, you still don't have proper street light, that means there is something wrong. There are multiple committees and commissions that have suggested that this scheme should be removed because this is just a waste of money. In fact, in the COVID-19 crisis, for a couple of years, the government stopped this scheme. The government said that no, we don't have enough money, but now it has resumed once again. Second ARC suggested that this should be abolished altogether because it has not really been able to achieve its objective. They say that this scheme is also kind of arbitrary because the member of parliament, usually when they decide or when they recommend in which area development should take place, they specifically ignore the areas from where they think they did not get the votes. For example, if the member of parliament knows that this is one locality where people don't like me, where people voted for my opposition, or where people voted for my opponent, people's members of parliament will specially not give any funds to that area. That is again a problem. Mustafa is saying, how was Gautam Gambhir making commentary during World Cup matches? Mustafa, what is your question? How means he was speaking on the mic, that's how. Your question is how Gautam Gambhir was making commentary during World Cup matches. I'm not sure what you're trying to ask. Are you asking it was an office of profit or not? Is that what your question is? Is that what your question is? That how was he working somewhere else? Okay. So let me clarify this. Office of profit does not say you cannot do a private sector job. What does office of profit say? It says if you're MP or MLA, you cannot hold any other office under the government. Private sector jobs, etc., are different. Sachin Tendulkar was a Rajya Sabha MP for 6 years. He worked. Sunny Deol, Lok Sabha MP, 5 years. He made Gadar 2 and he earned a lot of money doing Gadar 2. That is also fine. Vijay Mallya, once upon a time, was a Rajya Sabha member, still was selling liquor. There are a lot of people who are in the Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha who have their own business. Private jobs or private businesses are not considered as office of profit. Please understand. Office of profit means you cannot hold any other government job or government post. Okay. Members of Parliament or state legislature should also come under RTI. That is also a demand that has not been accepted. Right now, you cannot file an RTI, especially for your MPs or MLAs. For example, you cannot ask your MPs or MLAs that how many questions did you ask in the parliament, how much money, for example, have you spent from the MP LED scheme, where are you trying to spend the money. You cannot ask those specific questions right now to MPs or MLAs. That also is a suggestion that they should also be answerable, they should also come under the RTI. That was a report which was on ethics in governance. Ethics in governance is one of the most important reports of second ARC. Most of the questions in ethics, GS2 also, are where you can actually quote multiple points from this report. Points about how to improve the working of the government, how to improve the efficiency of the government, how to bring more discipline to working of the government. All these things can be written as a part of the suggestion. Next, recommendation on the public order. Mainly, it talks about recommendations to improve the police system in India. Now, if you look at the policing system in India, it has a lot of issues. First, please understand police is under the state government. So, central government does not have their own police. Central government has the CBI. Central government have their own central armed police forces like CRPF, etc. But they don't have a police as such. The police comes under state government. Then there are union territory police, etc. Delhi police reports to union ministry, but let's leave that aside. Now, one of the most important things that have been suggested, and not just by second ARC, by many other committees, is that we should separate the function of investigation and other police function. Now, what do you mean by this? If you watch American movies or American TV serials, you will realize that when they are talking to their police officers, some of them are called detectives and some of them are called officers. Have you realized this? Some of them are called detectives and they are the police officers only, and some other are called officers. Now, how is that or why is that happening? The idea is simple. In most of the countries, the police is divided into two parts. In most of the countries, police is divided into two parts. One part for investigation, and another part for law and order. These are two separate functions of the police. For example, if a crime has been committed, to investigate who was behind the crime, collecting fingerprints, asking questions to the people, trying to connect all the different angles of the story, and then prove who is the criminal. That is the investigation part, which requires special training, which requires a lot of time to be spent on training. Second is a law and order thing. Law and order means maintaining law and order, running after the criminals, arresting them. If needed, then engage in the encounter as well. That's called law and order thing. That requires a special training. That is a lot more physical training based on weapons, based on how do you deal in these situations. These are two very separate functions. And in most of the police forces around the entire world, these are separate. Some are specially given investigation training, and some are given law and order training, and they don't mix and match. In India, that is not the case. In India, you expect the same police officer to solve a murder crime, to look into who committed the murder, look into all the evidences, and then you expect the same officer to run on the street, chase a criminal, engage in a gunfight. Then you expect the same officer to provide VIP security to the ministers or politicians. And then the same officer, as a punishment, will be asked to stand on the traffic light also. All of these things in India are done and are forced upon same officers, which is why efficiency of the police in India is extremely low. You can't blame them for this because you can't expect one single person to handle all these different departments without a specialized training being given to him or her. So the first suggestion is ensure that separation of investigation takes place from other police function, because again, how to investigate a crime is a very difficult task. It requires a specialist. You have to give them proper training. So have them separate, treat them separately. Has it been done? No. Has it been done? Not really. Because see, this is why CBI is much more efficient than police. Have you ever wondered how is it that CBI solves a lot of very important cases? Why is it that whenever there is a big case, there's a demand that CBI should take over the matter? How is CBI so special? What do they do differently as compared to the police? The simple thing that the CBI does, or how are they different from the police, is the CBI, as a name suggests, Crime Bureau of Investigation. They focus only on investigation. You will not see CBI officers running around trying to catch criminals. You might see some of them, but mostly CBI specially focuses on investigation. That is their USP. In police, you have given all sorts of functions to them, so you can't expect them to be extremely effective in all these functions. Then establish a state police performance and accountability commission. See, right now, if you have a problem with the police, there is not much that you can do. If you go to the police, they're not listening to you, there's not much that you can do. You can maybe try and file a complaint online, see if the Lokpal hears you out, but there's not much that you would be able to do if the police does not listen to you. So there has to be an accountability mechanism for the police as well. If the police is not doing their job properly, there has to be a place where people can go and file a complaint. This is what ASC suggested, that there should be a police performance and accountability mechanism which can work well for the police also. See, one of the problems in government services, and this is not just the police, you will see this in your field as well if you become an IAS officer. One of the big problems in the government services is that your promotion is 99.9% based only on the number of years that you have worked. For example, there are two IAS officers. One of them, very diligent, is available for people 24/7, never closes his office. Even if someone calls him for some help at 12 in the night, he's already available. The other officer goes to office at 10 a.m., closes the office at 5 p.m., not available to people after 5 p.m., no matter what happens. Both of them joined on the same day. They will get promotion at the same time, because what matters for your promotion in government services, 99.9%, your tenure. If the government rule is after 7 years you will get the promotion, then it will be after 7 years, no matter what you did in these 7 years. That discourages people who work extremely hard, because when you work hard, when you go out of your way, one of the reason that you are doing it is because you want to stand out, you want to make sure that you get promoted over the others. But in this government system, that doesn't happen. Similar is the case with the police as well. Even if there are people in the police who go the extra mile, who help the people as much as possible, even they know that they would not be given appreciation or appraisal beforehand. So to correct that, we should have this kind of a commission which can look into performance of the police as well. So that if there are officers who are performing much better than others, they should be prioritized, or their promotion should be prioritized over the others. That is again a suggestion that the second ARC says. They say reduce unnecessary burden on the police. You would have seen a lot of politicians that you would not even recognize having 5 or 6 police officers around them without even realizing that there is no threat to their life. No one even recognizes them. How will there be a threat to your life? But the politicians want at least 5, 6 police officers to be always around them. Always. Because it improves their prestige. It tells the people, see how powerful I am, how important I am. The police is running all around me. That creates unnecessary burden on the police. The police in itself has a lot of work to do. They themselves have a lot of issues, lot of crime, lot of pending FIRs, etc. On top of that, now you also tell them you are to be responsible for VIP security. That becomes a problem. So suggestion is reduce the unnecessary burden and improve forensic science infrastructure. See, criminals around the world are getting smarter day by day. It's getting even more and more difficult to solve crimes. That is why you have to focus a lot on forensic science, invest more in labs, etc. Make sure that all these labs are in topmost quality or in topmost condition, because in order to solve these crimes, you have to stay one step ahead of the criminals. For example, I'll tell you this real story. Uh, a few years back, there was the story of a girl who apparently had a breakup with her boyfriend. So her boyfriend had some personal photos with the girl of their intimate moments, and that boyfriend, to take revenge from the girl, started posting these photos online on Twitter. So this ex-boyfriend starts posting these personal photos of the girl on Twitter. So now this girl doesn't know what to do. She goes to the police. She files a complaint that see this is happening in Twitter, etc. The question that the police asked was, "Madam, what is Twitter? We don't know what Twitter is." Now imagine you go and file a complaint that this is happening to me on Twitter, and the police respond by saying, "What is Twitter? We don't know." Then what is the next step? How can you even think that the police will be able to solve that crime? Now I'm sure situation would have improved. I'm not saying all the police officers would be so oblivious to this technology or websites, etc. But again, the problem here is that forensic science infrastructure in India requires a lot of investment, especially with different types of crimes. Have you seen that uh, series on Netflix called Jamtara? If you have not seen it, have you heard of it, Jamtara? Okay. Some of you would have. If you have not heard of it, I'll tell you what this is. So basically, this is a series of a small village called Jamtara. So what has happened is, right now in states such as Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, there are villages right now that have become hubs of online fraud, where thousands of people do just this only. The calls that you receive, that we saw an ad, we want this job, we are sending you a link, we'll transfer this much money for you, you give us 5-star rating, we'll give you this much money. All these online frauds that you see today, most of these are taking place from very very small villages where people have thousands of sim cards, where they keep on changing their number, they keep on calling you. All that, in order to be detected, has to be, or there has to be a proper top notch infrastructure lab for that, and there should be people who should be trained enough to handle these situations. That is what the second ARC recommendation is. Guys, give me a minute, I'll just refill my water bottle. Give me a minute, I'll be back, huh? Don't go anywhere, just a minute. Yes. So we were discussing about recommendation of public order, mainly the police thing. Another recommendation is focus on community policing. Now, what do you mean by community policing? See, the idea is usually in most parts of the country, going to a police station or interacting with the police is considered as a very, very, very negative thing. You all would have heard it, right? If someone has to go to a police station, the family will say, "Oh, in our seventh generation, no one has ever been to a police station, and now see, you have to go to a police station." You would have heard these lines that we have never been to a police station. Now you are the ones because of whom we have to go to police. So approaching the police, talking to them, going to a police station, a very negative connotation. If you see police nearby in your locality, in your society, you usually have a very negative impression that something wrong has happened. This is where the responsibility of the police is to engage more with the community, to engage more, talk to citizens, talk to residents, make sure that they're comfortable with the police, make sure that they don't really think that calling the police would harm them. Because right now, a lot of people have this mindset that if I call the police for anything wrong, I will be the one who will get in trouble. I will be the one who will actually be held responsible. That is an image that has to change. Yes, G, I'm talking about the same feeling. Anyone who is asked to interact with the police usually has a sense of, I won't say scare, but has a sense of anxiety that no, something wrong will happen. Responsibility of that will be with the police to sensitize more people. Then gender sensitization. Right now we have very, very few women police officers, very few. The situation is so bad that in most of the police stations we don't even have one female officer. And if a female has to be arrested, the law says there has to be a female police officer to arrest a female. In the absence of female officers, that becomes a big challenge. Not just this, if you go to police stations are supposed to have lockups separate for males and separate for female. So female lockups are supposed to be separate. However, what is happening in these cases in a lot of police stations, we see that the police locking up females also in the same lockup because they just don't have enough infrastructure. We have seen a lot of atrocities against women in the police station because there is very little gender sensitization. At least one third of the forces have to be women. Now, few states, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, have started the idea of female police stations. So there are a few police stations in these states that are specifically only run by female, that mainly look into crimes against females. But again, unless you have a lot more presence of female officers across the entire police force, the situation will not improve. These are the recommendations on public order or how to improve the police. Then ARC gave recommendation on local governance. Local governance basically means panchayats and municipalities mainly. In Indian polity, you would have read about these two local governments, panchayats and municipalities, 73rd, 74th Amendment Act. You would have read about the problems that they face, mainly the problems about the lack of funds not being given to them, central government not giving any funds, state government not giving any funds or any power as such. These are some of the issues that the second ARC also discusses. Second ARC says have a proper appointment procedure for state election commission. Now, just like at the center government level, we for a long time we did not have any appointment procedure. The president just appointed on the recommendation of the prime minister. Similarly, at the state level, even today, there is no proper appointment procedure for state election commission. Even today at the state level, state election commission appointed by the governor on recommendation of the chief minister. So chief minister recommends and the governor just appoints them without really taking into consideration what exactly are the qualifications. Panchayats and municipalities have not been given enough money, have not even been given enough power or responsibilities. We all have read about 11th and the 12th schedule. 11th and the 12th schedules have a lot of these areas where panchayats and the municipalities may be given the power to make laws. Maybe. That one word may is the big problem. They may be given the power, they may be given funds, they may be given responsibility. The word may indicate that this is not compulsory. This is what the second ARC is discussing, that we have to give them more powers and responsibility in order to expect a better change on the ground. They also suggested that the State Finance Commission should give detailed report. Now, if you compare Finance Commission of India at the center level with the State Finance Commission, it's very different. Just like at the center level, the President of India appoints a Finance Commission once in 5 years. They have recently appointed the 16th one, by the way. They appoint them once in 5 years. They will suggest how much revenue from the taxes center government should distribute to the states. Similarly, at the state level, based on the recommendations of the government, governor appoints a state finance commission, again once in 5 years. The State Finance Commission is supposed to recommend to the center government or rather to state government how much money to give to panchayats and municipalities. The difference, however, is Finance Commission of India gives a very detailed report. They tell on what basis are they recommending funds being transferred, what are the terms of references, have they taken population into consideration, have they taken income level into consideration, forest cover, all these things are taken into consideration. State finance commissions in most cases don't give a detailed report. They will just randomly give a number. This much should be given to panchayat, this much to municipality. How have they calculated it? Why this number? Why not something else? There is no clarity on this issue. So the idea is the second ARC says that the reports of the second ARC should be more detailed so that the state government can take action accordingly. Also, have better tax revenue. Now, please under non-tax revenue. Please understand the governments usually earn in two ways. The government earning is in the form of tax and non-tax. Tax, as you know, the tax that we pay, GST, income tax, corporate tax, etc. The government also earns in a non-tax manner. Now, what is non-tax? For example, fees, any fine that we pay. For example, when you go to a market, park your bike or park your car, you will have to pay the parking fee, right? That. Or let's say you pay your electricity bill, you pay your water bill. All these are non-tax revenues of the government. The local bodies, that is panchayats and the municipalities, are dependent on the states to give most of the money to them. That is why this is a problem, because states themselves don't have money. States keep on saying, oh, center does not give us the money, how can we give you any money? So the solution is not to force the states to give money to local government. The solution is to have an alternate source of income for the local government. That alternate source of income for the local government can be in the form of non-tax revenue, focusing on fees, fine, penalties, etc. This is where the focus has to be. I'll give you one more example. One more suggestion is, for example, let's say there is a village nearby a highway. On that highway, there is a toll. The toll that is collected on the highway, that should be given to the nearby village, or a part of it should be given to a nearby village. At least that is a way in which they can be self-sustaining. I'll give you one more example. It's a real example which I saw myself so that you can understand. So a few months back, I traveled to Kerala. I traveled to a place called Wayanad. Wayanad is the same place from where Rahul Gandhi is a Lok Sabha member. So we went to Wayanad and we were just visiting all the places. And there was a very famous waterfall in Wayanad that you can go to. Now, if you go to Wayanad, let's go to the waterfall. Just before the waterfall, there's a parking. So you park your car and then you have to walk slightly. Now, in the parking, what the government has done is that area is a rural area. So the panchayat of that village has been given the power to collect revenue from the parking and use it for their own development. Like the parking receipt I got for 100 rupees, they that said the name of the village and the panchayat, that this parking fee is for this panchayat. So the money I paid was used by them. That's an example of how non-tax revenue can actually be utilized, or non-tax revenue can be collected by the local governments to help them. Like in big cities, metro cities especially, when you go and park your car on in a market, etc., it's not cheap, it's expensive parking. It is the municipality that usually takes that money. In urban areas, when you give or when you have food waste, you would have seen municipality comes to collect your food waste. You have to pay them a fee. So there's a monthly fee that goes for collection of your waste. That is also a non-tax revenue. So the government, rather than focusing on the state government actually giving them the money, rather than that, open up more avenues, open up more options for the local government to earn their own money. Then allow borrowing as well within permissible limits. Now, the problem is you will be able to borrow from the market only when the market believes that you can repay. No one will give a loan to you if they don't believe that you have the power to repay the loan. Loan will only be given if they think, yes, you can repay the loan, you have that potential. The problem with panchayats and the municipalities is that no one knows their revenue source. So, how will they pay any loan to them? It is only the big municipalities in India that have the money to pay. Like if you look at Mumbai municipality, the BMC, Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation, it has a huge budget. It is said that the BMC, Brihan Mumbai Municipal Corporation, has a budget which is more than some of the small states in India. So only the municipalities in bigger cities, because they can charge more money, they take property tax, etc. Only they have the potential to take loan. But the problem is for that also they require the government's permission. Without the backing of the government, they will not be able to borrow money from the market. So suggestion is that local governments like panchayats and municipalities should be allowed to borrow money from the market within the permissible limit. The government should back them. The government should ensure that they are able to get loan on a favorable condition so that they are able to get that development corpus or the development funds that they require. All right. Any questions so far that you want to ask before we go ahead? If you are not able to understand what's written in these photos, no problem at all. This is just for fun, not a part of the syllabus. So don't ask me what is written here. If you can't understand, just ignore. Nothing to worry. Nothing that you can quote in the examination anyway. Chituri is saying, for state government wants to borrow, does central government has to give permission? Yes. Central government has to give permission. Most of the state governments borrow from central government only. If they borrow from the market, they have to take central government's permission. Central government only allows those who can actually, who are in a good state of health. Only those states that don't have pending loans of central government, usually they are only allowed permission. Yes, Vivek, it is from Panchayat series. Arnab is saying, if anti-defection law is tightened up, can president be able to take decision on his discretion? No, Arnab. Even today, president does take decisions on disqualification of members of parliament, but for that, president does not decide on his or her own. For disqualification purposes, president takes the advice of the election commission. So even today, a member of parliament, for example, can be disqualified for holding an office of profit, can be disqualified if he is not a citizen of India anymore. Those disqualifications happen from the order of the president, but not on his discretion, not even on the advice of the prime minister, but those decisions are taken by the president of India on the recommendation of the election commission. So that is also a suggestion that if anti-defection law is changed and if we want the president to take the decision, it will not be on his own discretion. Anything else before we go ahead? Anything else, or should we go ahead? Okay. The next report that the second ARC gave was called Capacity Building for Conflict Resolution. In essence, what exactly this report is, Indian government has been facing a lot of internal security issues. For example, Naxalism, terrorism, all these are big threats. Now, Dr. Manmohan Singh, when he was the prime minister, he once said in a speech that since our independence, India has lost many more soldiers to Naxalism, many, many more, as compared to what we have lost at our borders. Just that the issue at the border takes much more of a news time and news coverage. But the biggest internal security threat that India has ever faced is Naxalism. You can call it by different names. You can call it insurgency, you can call it Naxalism, you can call it other words. The second ARC has suggested how to deal with these situations, what has the government been doing right, and what should be the approach going forward. Now, the one thing that you have to appreciate, doesn't matter which government is in power. In India's history, ever since our independence, doesn't matter which government is in power, one thing is common, that the approach against insurgency and Naxalism remains the same. I'll tell you what that approach is. The approach usually is that the government does not want to use force at first. The government always tries to negotiate, and what the government tries is whatever the whoever the leader is of that entire movement, the government tries to convince them to enter politics. The argument of the government is that if you really have support of so many people, why don't you fight elections, become MP or MLA, become a chief minister, then do whatever you want. That is what the government's argument has usually always been. So you can look at Northeast, you can look at issues in Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand in terms of Naxalism. You can even look at separatist leaders in Jammu Kashmir. The government, irrespective of whichever party is in power, they have usually taken the same approach: negotiate, try to bring these underground leaders above the ground, try to make them enter politics, and they have been able to do that in a lot of cases, especially in the northeast part of the country. In northeast part of the country, the government of India has been able to sign a lot of peace accords. Many of the leaders who were first earlier fighters have entered politics. For example, in Indian polity, you all would have read about the Assam Accord. When you were reading about citizenship, I'm sure you would have read about the Assam Accord. Remember? Assam Accord signed in 1985 when there was this huge agitation going on in Assam. Do you know Assam Accord, when it was signed, most of the leaders of Assam Accord movement, the Assam Gan Parishad movement, the student union movement, almost all of them joined politics. Many of them later became ministers. Many of them even became the chief ministers of Assam after that. Many of them entered politics, even became chief ministers, became a part of central government also. Again, an example of the government able to negotiate and bring them into mainstream politics. Something that almost every government has followed. Similar is the recommendation of the second ARC. Number one, always give negotiation a priority, which the government does. Give more protection to senior functionaries. Now, it is very unfortunate if you look at Naxal affected areas, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, etc. The entire idea of Naxalites is that anyone working for the government is their enemy. The entire idea is anyone representing the state, anyone representing the government is their enemy. And anyone who is in the position of prominence, especially, they want to capture them, kidnap them, so that the government takes a note. So there are many high profile kidnappings. There have been There have been cases of district collectors being kidnapped. There have been cases of many senior leaders, many senior ministers being assassinated. And the problem is when someone at a high position, like a collector, a minister, gets assassinated or kidnapped, it dents the image that the forces have in the minds of the common people. Because then the common people think that if the police or the collector cannot safeguard himself or herself, how can they save us? And that is what becomes a problem. Other suggestion: enhance the capacity of security forces, give them more funding. In these Naxal areas, one of the problems why police or the forces are not able to capture Naxals is because they are very familiar with the forest. Police or CRPF, etc., not that familiar. They require special machinery. They require night vision cameras, etc., which has to be given by the government. Sensitize the police and paramilitary personnel. One of the problems in this area is the government deploys CRPF. CRPF is not local, they come from other states. So they don't know the complex issues of this area. If you have some time, uh, I'll suggest you to read a book. Uh, if you have some time later on, not in your preparation, at least not till the prelims is over, I'll suggest you a book. Read the book called The Buster Story. It's a book written by an author called Rahul Pandita. Yes, Vaishnav. Sorry, correct. Thank for correcting me. It's Hello Buster and Buster Story, I think. Hello Buster, I think you can search. So if you look at this and if you read this book, and again, it will take some time, but it's a very, very good book. If you want to understand the problem of Naxalism, then I would highly suggest you to read this. I'll just check the name. Hello Buster, I think, or not the Buster Story. Yeah. Hello Buster is the name of the book. So, and thank you, Vaishnav, for correcting. This is an amazing book to understand how the problem of Naxalism started in India. What are the issues? Because just reading one or two paragraph about it is not enough to understand the real problem. We read a chapter, we read a paragraph, and we think, oh, we know what Naxalism is, why are people fighting? No, you would not be able to understand without actually reading the entire story behind it. So it's a great book, but again, don't read it before the exam. It's not that important for the exam. But basically, it gives you a story about the two sides: the side of the police, how and why are they fighting; side of the Naxals, how and why are they fighting. So you have to understand that to solve this problem, force alone can never be the solution. You have to sensitize the police because the people who are fighting, they have their own cause. Let's take a simple example. Very simple example. So people who live in these areas are mostly tribals. They don't have education. They don't have a lot of earning opportunities. So how do they earn money? One of the ways in which they earn money is they collect what you call as a tendu leaves. You know what are tendu leaves? They collect tendu leaves. So tendu leaves basically are leaves of the plant that are used to make bidi. That smoke that you do, not you do, the smoke that people do, the bidi. So these are bidi leaves. So there are tendu leaves. So basically, the only job that these tribals mostly have, they roam around in the forest and they collect those tendu leaves and then they submit it to the contractor. Now, what happens in this case is these tendu leaves. Now, do you know this? When they collect about 200 tendu leaves, which are perfect, which can be used without any mark, without any hole. If they collect 200 of this in a day, do you know how much are they paid? They are paid 10 rupees for this. 10 rupees if they collect 200 of these tendu leaves. Now imagine the life that they are living. Now, when they demand a higher fee, the contractor will say, no, no, I won't give you a higher fee. They will beat the people. Now, there have been cases when these tribals have gone to police to complain, and police, rather than listening to them, police has kidnapped their daughters, taken them to police station, raped them, and then brought thrown the daughter back. Now imagine the psyche of the people living in the village where they would think that the police is our enemy, contractor is our enemy. In short, everyone working for the government is our enemy. Now, in that situation, someone comes to them in a village and says, "You just follow what I am telling you, and I will give you the revenge that you want. I will take revenge for your entire family. You just follow my instruction." Then now imagine the situation of the villagers. What option do they have? Why would they not follow the instructions given? Even if the instruction is to take up a gun, even if the instruction is to blast a bomb, why would they not take up? So again, not that the entire system is like this, but these are some examples of how complex the problem is, and thus you have to sensitize it. So again, the recommendation is sensitize the police, paramilitary forces who are coming from outside, from other states, try and make them understand the situation of this area. Have a special task force. Now, you see this logo here. This logo is of a force called the Greyhounds. One more interesting part about Naxalism, when we talk about Naxalism today in India, our first thought is it's a problem based in Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, some part of Odisha also. But the reality is, history of Naxalism in India starts from Andhra Pradesh. It's actually Andhra Pradesh from where Naxalism actually began in India. The first few leaders of Naxalism in 1950s, 1960s all came from Andhra Pradesh. That was the major hub of Naxal movement in India. That is where it all started. But the impressive part is now Andhra Pradesh has almost 100% controlled that problem. How? One of the things that they did was they made this force called the Greyhounds. Devsmita is saying how Naxalbari is in West Bengal. Devsmita, Naxalbari is a place on whose name Naxalism was named. So Naxalbari was a place where that incident took place, so a name called Naxalism. But the starting of the movement was in Andhra Pradesh. This is where the first few people, a group came in with this ideology of fighting against the government, with this ideology of getting the tribal support. All that started in Andhra Pradesh, much, much before Naxalbari happened. Anyways, so Andhra Pradesh, what they did was they created a force called the Greyhounds. This is the Greyhounds. What they did was they knew that the strength of the Naxals is that they hide in the forest. And these are extremely dense forest where you would not really be able to capture, you would not really be able to understand where the people are. So what they did was they recruited people who are locals. They try to find out people in the local villages who want to fight against Naxals. They recruited them, made a part of the force, and then they called them the Greyhound, so that now they would actually be able to go ahead and find them out wherever they're hidden in the forest, because they will also be extremely familiar with the forest. That is the entire idea of Greyhound. Now, Greyhound is considered as the most successful example of a force that has been able to fight against the Naxal movement. Other states are also trying to do the same, but again, they have to learn much more from Andhra Pradesh. Apart from this, they also suggested strengthening the local level police station because they are under threat mostly. The amount of weapons or the class of weapons that the police stations have these days in these areas, they are more obsolete as compared to Naxal. Naxals have better weapons. Now, by the way, have you ever thought of how Naxals earn money? How is it that they're able to buy weapons and bombs and food, etc.? How do they earn money exactly? What is their source of income? Okay, Chituri, Aniket. A lot of people are saying, giving me option, which is fine, but I'm still not able to get to the biggest source of money. Jhansi, for money laundering, you need to have money, right? Most of the people are saying drug cartels, smuggling, dacoit, fine, robbing police station, okay, drugs. I'm still not getting the one biggest source. Still not getting the one biggest source. Okay, Karthik. No, I'll tell you the one biggest source. Now, please understand this. Akhil has given me a good answer now. Okay, now please understand. You can stop writing now. Now, please understand this. What is common in areas where Naxals are mostly found in India. Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha. What is common in these three? Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha. What is common in these three? This is the mineral belt of India. This is the mineral belt of India. Please understand this. The Naxals actually are all concentrated in the mineral belt of India. So they have a lot of area under their control where they illegally mine minerals. They illegally take out minerals and then they sell it in the market at a lesser price. That is their biggest source of income. Other things also are true. I'm not saying that's not true, but that's all secondary. Their biggest source of income is they capture that mineral belt of India and they try and take out these illegal minerals and they sell it in the market. Then there's a bit foreign help as well. There are some raids conducted by our police, by our forces, where they found out the weapons that they were using were made in China. They were using made in Pakistan weapons as well. So that foreign help angle also exists. The other recommendation of the second ARC is to have better implementation of the PISA Act and the Forest Right Act. Now, one of the biggest issues that we have in the Naxal movement, or why people join the Naxal movement, is their right of land has been taken away from them. Please understand, for tribals, their land is much more important than anything else. For tribals, they don't really change their house or their home. Their land is everything. It's not just home, it's where they live. They earn the money from those land only. They depend on the cultivation that comes in from that land. So for them, land is everything. Now, this is where something interesting happens. Now, the reason is the government of India has made certain laws about giving them the right to ownership. The problem is, although tribals have been living in these lands for many years, but they don't have an official ownership record. When you don't have an official record for ownership, then someone can come in tomorrow, remove you from your land. So the government made a law called Forest Rights Act. So we have a Forest Rights Act 2006. So basically, Forest Rights Act was, if you are living in an area for many years, government will give you the ownership, government will prepare paperwork for you. You will be the official owners of the land so that no one can take away the land from you. Maximum government will give you 4 acres of land. Maximum the government will give you 4 acres of land per family. That was the entire idea. The scheme on paper sounded very good. All the government schemes do. On paper, they always sound very good. That the government will give you the land, the government will make sure no one takes the land from you, etc., etc. But the implementation part just did not strike well. The government was not able to implement that properly, because the problem is, you make a law sitting in Delhi, sitting in the parliament, but that law has to be implemented on the ground by the local administration. And when the local administration is corrupt, or when the local administration is not ready to implement the law well, that becomes a problem. So a lot of these laws have been made but have not been implemented well. The biggest problem the tribals still have, the biggest complaint that they still have, is that their land has been taken away by the industrialists, by the corporates, and they don't have anything left, and the government is not doing anything about them. Devshika Singh, is Veerappan a correct example of Naxalism? No. No, not Naxalism. You can call him a decoy. See, Naxals are very different. Naxalism is an ideology that is mainly against the government, that wants to establish their own kind of government. That is what Naxalism is. For them, anyone working for the government is an enemy. Veerappan started as a pure smuggler. Then he dabbled into other things also, but he started as a pure smuggler. Anyways, the ARC also suggested breaking the nexus between illegal mining, forest contractors, and transporters and extremists, as I discussed. If you have to end Naxalism or any of these law and order issues, you have to end their source of income. And for Naxalism, the source of income is illegal mining more than anything else. Then there is selling of forest produce, etc. that comes secondary, but the biggest source of revenue is illegal mining, taking out the minerals, selling them from the mineral belt of India. That has to be curtailed. They also suggested use of government agency like BRO. BRO is Border Road Organization. Now, there are two ways to look at this problem. Let's imagine there is a village in Chhattisgarh, very far off from the main heart of the state, very underdeveloped, does not have road, does not even have telephone towers. Okay. Now, when the government tries to build any proper road, tries to put up telecom towers in that village, the people, the contractors are attacked by the Naxalites. So no contractor wants to go there. On the other hand, the villagers say government does not want our development. See, government is not building infrastructure in our village. We don't have any road. We don't have even phone connection. Other villages have all that. So it's kind of a catch 22 situation. Government says that if we do that, the Naxalites attack them. And the villagers say that you are not developing or you are not giving any revenue or any funding for development in our area specifically. So we'll fight against you. This is where the idea suggested by the second ARC is rather than depending upon private contractors, because usually what happens, NHAI, National Highway Authority of India, deploys many private contractors to do their job, to build these roads. Rather than that, deploy those agencies which are used to working in dangerous conditions. Like the BRO, Border Road Organization, does not get the credit that it deserves. If you look at India's border, especially in the past 1 or 2 decades, a lot of roads and huge bridges, etc., have been built. Tunnels that you see are being built under the mountains nearby our border areas. All of that is being done by the BRO, Border Road Organization. They are an expert in working in these dangerous terrain. They are an expert in working in these threatening areas. So, as for the second ARC, we should use the expertise of agencies such as the BRO in building infrastructure in these areas rather than depending on any private contractor by the NHAI. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions from whatever we have discussed? Let me know and then we'll take a break. Any questions so far? Okay. Let's take a break, be back at 7:40, and then we'll resume from here. Thank you. Hi everyone. I hope all of you are back. Perfect. So the next report that we will go into is the recommendation on water related issues. Now, as you all know, water related issues are something that have been a point of contention between multiple states in India. India, with still the population increasing, sources of fresh water are limited. The amount of pressure on our population in terms of the water available is extremely high. And that is why there are multiple disputes between states when it comes to water relations. The most prominent one, for example, is the Kaveri water dispute. The Kaveri water dispute mainly between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Then there's the Satluj Yamuna canal issue that is mainly between Punjab and Haryana. There are a lot of these examples which highlight that there is just not enough water for everyone's need. Now, there are two important aspects to it. First, India's population is extremely high and the freshwater resources are limited, number one. Second problem is that India is an agricultural major economy. If we would have been an economy which does not focus on agriculture and most of it would have been imported, then we would not have really had this issue. But because a lot of our water requirement also goes into agriculture, that means we have that also to be covered. And this is why there are continuous water related disputes, so much so that there have been people who have lost their lives in the Kaveri water dispute between Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. There are some farmers who have even committed suicide saying that they don't have enough water now. So there is an urgent need to resolve these water related disputes, and there has to be a mechanism also, because this is not the only water related dispute that we have. In the future, as the population increases even further, we might have even more water related issues. So there is a need to have a proper mechanism set up. How do we resolve these water disputes even in the future? So, what has the second ARC suggested? Number one, more proactive. Don't wait for the states to bring these issues up. As you know, the water related disputes in India, interstate water disputes, are mainly resolved by setting up the tribunal. So we have interstate water tribunals that can be set up in case of interstate water disputes. Now, this is where it has to be understood that the central government should not wait for the states to bring up these issues. If the central government can first assume that yes, in the future there can be these issues, they can resolve it in a much better manner. Follow the spirit of Article 262. Now, what do you mean by that? What is Article 262, by the way? What is Article 262? So basically, Article 262 is what I wrote here. It talks about setting up of interstate council for these disputes. Now, if you look at interstate dispute, now I'll give you an example. So basically, if you look at water tribunals in India, or interstate water tribunals in India, the law says that the decision given by the interstate water tribunal, what is Article 262? Basically, it says that interstate water tribunal can be set up by the parliament. Article 262 says that the interstate water tribunal set up by the parliament, their decisions can't be challenged in any court. Their decisions can't be challenged in Supreme Court. But in reality, that is not true. In reality, you take the example of the Kaveri water dispute. In reality, the Kaveri water dispute, in fact, has been challenged in the Supreme Court multiple times. Now, how is that possible? If Article 262 says interstate water disputes can't be challenged in the Supreme Court, on the other hand, how do we have a situation that interstate water disputes are being challenged? I'll tell you. So basically, there are two big loopholes here. Two loopholes that are now utilized. One loophole When someone goes to the Supreme Court against the order of the Interstate Water Tribunal, they are not going to change the order. They are going to Supreme Court saying that the order has not been implemented. Like, for example, when you look at the Kaveri water dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Now, in this dispute, when the decision came in of the tribunal, Karnataka state specifically was unhappy about it. They did not implement the order. So Tamil Nadu went to the Supreme Court and their argument was we are going to the Supreme Court because Karnataka is not implementing the order. So they went there for implementation, number one. Second is even more interesting. They go to Supreme Court arguing that it is a violation of our fundamental rights. Now please understand this big loophole. People go to Supreme Court saying that the amount of water that the tribunal has given to us is not enough for us to live our life. So this is a violation of article number 21. See, article number 21 gives you the right of life, and right of life also includes having enough water to live. So people go to the Supreme Court saying that we don't have enough water to live now because the tribunal has given the decision in such a manner, and we want to challenge that. So their argument is we are not challenging what the tribunal said, we are challenging the fact that our fundamental right is being taken away. This is a big loophole. Now, finding out these loopholes is the responsibility of the lawyers. That's why they charge a high amount of fee. So they find out these loopholes, they tell the clients, and then they go to the court. This is what second ARC said should not happen. Rather than finding loopholes and see if we can actually try and go to Supreme Court in some way or the other, the responsibility should be follow what Article 262 says in spirit. If Article 262 says that the decision cannot be challenged in the Supreme Court, it should not be challenged. They also say river basin organization should be set up for each interstate river. So every interstate river means a river shared between multiple states should have an organization, river basin organization, that will try and make sure that these kind of disputes don't arise at the first place. They will try and make sure that any of these disputes before coming to light should be addressed as soon as possible. Then national water law should be enacted. Means we should have a law beforehand to actually decide how will the water related disputes be solved. We do have a water interstate water tribunal law in the constitution, but there is no specific law to tell us how to resolve water related disputes. Because again, we do have all the water related disputes right now, but it will only increase in the future with population increasing even further. The next report of second ARC, I think you will personally be interested in the most, because the second or this report of the second ARC is what pertains to the UPSC examination mainly. So if you did not find any of the reports so far connected to you, I'm sure you will find this report connected to you specifically. So in this report, the ARC recommended how to refurbish personal administration. In short, how to refresh recruitments in the government, how to change recruitments in the government, recruitment process, be it the UPSC exam or other exams. So listen to these very carefully. You might or might not like these ideas. So far, they have not been implemented, but let's see what are your views about it. First interesting recommendation. They said government should set up something like National Institute of Public Administration. Now, what is this? Governments or the second ARC says, let's assume that someone after class 12th has already made up their mind that they want to prepare for the civil services examination. Now, for the civil service examination, you need to have graduation. So people join any graduation just for the sake of it. You join any college just for the sake of it because you just want a graduation degree, right? And then rather than focusing on college, they focus on the UPSC exam. So their attention is divided between the two, some attention to college, some attention to UPSC exam. So the recommendation is government should set up these colleges called National Institute of Public Administration. So after class 12th, if you want to prepare for UPSC, why don't you enter this college? The subjects taught in this college will be the same as you have to read in UPSC exam. So here you will be taught subjects such as geography, economics, polity, science and tech, agriculture, history, and you can prepare for the exam also and you get a 3-year degree as well. That is the idea. Rather than forcing the people to take up any kind of graduation just for the sake of it, rather than that, why not have a situation where they study the same thing as they need to study in a proper college form and not have to go anywhere outside? That is their idea. Now, again, the idea will only work if you have already decided for the UPSC exam while you are in class 12th. If you decide about this after you are in college, then obviously it doesn't work for you. Doesn't work for you, but it will only work if you have decided in class 12 itself. No, Chituri, it has not been implemented. It has not been implemented, but that is an idea. That why not let the people focus only on the college so that they're taught the same thing. One of the problems with this will be, I'll tell you the problem with this. The problem with this will be, if you don't go through the UPSC exam, let's say you did not clear it, then does this degree now help you get some other job? That is the big problem here. Let's assume you did not clear the UPSC exam even after passing this college. For 3 years, you studied, get a graduation degree. Now, the question is, would this degree of Bachelor in Public Administration help you get some other job or not? Would it be a good backup option or not? That is a challenge. And that is something that has to be looked into. But again, the government has not accepted this idea so far. Second big idea, change the number of attempts that students have. Now, I am a big supporter of this idea personally. The recommendation is for general category. You should only be allowed to give exam from 21 to 25 with only 3 attempts. OBC 21 to 28, 5 attempts. SC/ST physically handicapped till 29 years of age. Now, for though I'm sure all of you know this, but if you don't know, right now general category you can give exam up to 32 years of age, 6 attempts. That is the present situation. Now, I am a big supporter of this, and I'll tell you why. See, there is a concern amongst many people in India today that exams such as UPSC demand a lot from you in the prime of your age. 20s is the most prime of your age. You can take a lot of risk. You don't have a lot of responsibility. You can experiment with yourself. You can see other field. You can see if you can actually, if you like some other field or not. The problem with giving someone 6 attempts is that you are giving a hope to the person that maybe next time. And by the end of it, if the person spends 5 to 6 years in this field and does not get through the exam, they are lagging way behind as compared to others. And even if they switch their field after 6 years, it will be very hard for them to catch up. My personal advice also, whenever I meet an aspirant, my personal advice to everyone is never think about 6 attempts. This is a very, very, very bad idea. Whenever you start your preparation, think of it like a 2 year or a maximum 3 year journey. Most cases, my advice has is always just focus for 2 years. If it happens in 2 years, great. If it doesn't happen in 2 years, no worries. You can still go to some other field, make a good name for yourself. No problem with that. But the more problematic it becomes. Because again, this is the most prime of your life where you can actually experiment, explore other fields. When you're, let's say, in general category, when you're 32 now, and at 32 now you're trying to enter a new field because you expired all your UPSC attempt, that becomes very difficult for you to catch up then. But again, really depends upon you. The problem here is, it's one of those policy decisions where the government can give it, people will be happy, but the government can't take it back because then people will be very angry. Government can give it, but they can't take it back because people will be very, very angry. It's like reservation. You can give reservation, Some people will be very happy, but you can't take it back, because the moment you decide you take it back, there will be protests, lakhs and lakhs of people will be on the road. Like earlier, if you go back a few years, we used to have four attempts for general category. It was around 2014, 2015 that the government announced we are increasing the number of attempts to six. So you increase the attempts, people will be happy, but you can't cut it down now because people prepare for this exam for many years. And then randomly, if you cut down the number of attempts, their argument will be, oh, now what do we do? So government can't cut it short. But again, at least I agree with the suggestion. You may or may not. Next, I agree with this as well. The next one, change the pattern of the exam. How? The problem with the UPSC exam right now is it's a 1 year cycle. Means if you look at this, so prelims, let's say in May, mains exam, let's assume in September, interview Jan, final result March, something like this. It's a lump sum assumption of the cycle. So if you see, this is almost a 10-month cycle. The problem with this cycle is, let's assume someone reached till the interview stage, and on the day of the final result, they found out that they have not passed. So they will have to start once again from this stage. So what you are doing is you are actually making it a very large cycle of 1 year, almost 1 year. No other exam has such a long cycle. No other exam has such a long cycle where you again would have to start all over again. So the idea is, if you look at the subject that you study for prelims and for mains exam, 80% of those are the same. If you leave optional aside for a minute, 80% of the subjects for mains and prelims are the same. There are few subjects that are in the mains exam only, like international relations, ethics, world history, disaster management. Some of them are just for mains, but most of the exam subjects and syllabus is common in prelims and mains both. So when you actually read for the prelims exam, the suggestion is it's not that difficult that you can't prepare for the mains simultaneously. So the idea is something like this. The idea is, let's assume have prelims in May, and along with that, within 10 to 15 days have the mains exam. So let's say within 7 days or 10 or 15 days in the month of May itself have the mains exam. Then have the interviews. Let's say September will be the interview, and then give the final result by December. So you can cut short the cycle to half a year. But for that to happen, there are some issues that will be need to be solved. The only way that you can do this, the only way that you can do this is either make the prelims exam online. When you make the prelims exam online, you can get instant result. Like when you give the bank exam, any exam that you give online, at the end of the exam, you know your score right there, and you know how much you have scored. It's only when you get the paper pen exam, then it takes some days to calculate. But the good part is now, even to give out OMR results or prelims result, UPSC does not take a lot of time. It is now giving you the result in less than 20 days now. Earlier, they used to take 1.5 to 2 months just to give the prelims result. Now they have cut short the time so much that even to give the prelims result, they don't even take 20 days. So if they really want, they can push or they can pull the mains examination, and they can do it within 3 weeks of the prelims exam. What will it do is it will actually make sure the cycle is much smaller. So the number of time or number of months that you are wasting in case you don't go through. If you go through the exam, it doesn't matter to you. But in case you don't make it through, then the number of months or weeks that you have wasted will be reduced drastically. That is a suggestion. But again, in exam like UPSC, drastic suggestions are usually never taken up. You can't expect something drastic to happen all of a sudden. The government will always do something gradually. It will never, never, never be drastic. And that is why such suggestions may not be accepted. Then, Proper provision for transiting from state civil service to IAS after 8 to 10 years. So what is this all about? Right, right now the rule is, if you join a state civil service, like for example, you give Andhra Pradesh PCS, or let's say you give Kerala PCS exam or Haryana PCS or whatever, and you join these state services. So what happens is, the rule says after serving for 10 years, you may be promoted to IAS level. After serving for 10 years, you may be promoted to IAS level. So it's not automatic. UPSC will conduct an interview, just an interview for you. An interview will be done, and the UPSC will recommend your name, and you may be transitioned to IAS. Now, most of the people who join the state civil services join from this aspirational point of view only, that one day I will be at the IAS level, that one day I will be able to go to the IAS level after 10 years. But in reality, it does not happen. In reality, people spend 15, 20 years at the state civil service level, but they are not promotioned or they are not transitioned to IAS. In fact, there have been many state civil servants who have even filed cases in the Supreme Court that this rule is not being followed. After 10 years, also, we are not being given the option to transition into the IAS level. So, this is a big problem, that the rule is not followed properly. This is something that has been suggested by the secondary. I said the rule should be followed properly. If the rule is in place that after 10 years you will be transitioned, then there has to be a rule that you should be transitioned by then. You should not be waiting, or you have to go to the court for the officers to get into IAS level. This is again a suggestion that the second ARC has given. These are the suggestions that they gave for refurbishing personal management of personal administration, mainly for the examination that the UPSC conducts. Apart from that, there are recommendations on disaster management. Now, India is not really a country that is not used to disasters. We have seen, or we see every single year, disasters such as cyclones, we have floods, we have drought, we have earthquakes also in certain parts. So we are not a country that is unaware of disasters. We are a country that is supposed to be ready for it. We have something called NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, as well, one of the unique agencies which does not exist in most parts of the world. However, the problem here is, even our apparatus to fight against disasters needs some changes. As per the second ARC, we need to divide disasters into different levels: local, state, and national. What do you mean by this? Even if there is a small disaster or small issue, we straight away call the NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, to send their force. But they can't send their force everywhere. So there has to be a proper division of the level of disasters: local disasters, state disaster, and national disasters. National disaster can be managed by National Disaster Management Authority. State disaster should be managed by State Disaster Management Authority, and local should be done by local administration or the police. That is something that should be done. That's their suggestion. We can't have NDMA coming in saving, even in case of small disasters. Even more than this, in most of these issues, most of the disasters, armed forces are called in. You would have seen, mainly in cases of, let's say, earthquake, floods, etc., you call the armed forces and they always oblige by rescuing people. You have to be better prepared for this. 1% of the population should be at least in civil defense in next 5 years. Now, what do you mean by this? See, the idea is, every country, including India, apart from our armed forces, trains some common people. For example, if there is a disaster in your vicinity, you should be the one who's trained in this. They are called civil defense. Now, they are in different category. They are also in the category of home guards. So what they do is, civil defense means local population should be trained to handle situation like these and not be dependent always on the authorities. I'll give you an example. In a lot of cities, Delhi, for example, I know for sure. In Delhi, Delhi government very regularly keeps on holding workshops for women where they teach them self defense. They give ads in the newspaper, it's free of cost, women can register, and they are taught self defense, how to defend themselves in certain situations. That's what they do. So again, something similar as per the second ARC should be done. Common people should be taught to take care of themselves, because you never know when the situation arises where you would have to be in action, rather than depending on someone from the armed forces or the NDMA to come to your rescue. Similarly, give medical training to police as well. One of the problems that we have is right now, although we have a situation where the police can rescue people, but what you don't expect is the police does not know what to do in terms of medical attention or first aid. I'll give you an example. So for example, let's say this train tragedy happened, the Balasore train tragedy. Now in this case, the issue is, even if you, let's say, rescue people, you have taken them out of the train, you have taken them out of the compartment. Now, are you able to give them the first aid or not? That becomes a problem. So the police has to be trained in first aid. Not just the police, the firemen also has to be trained in first aid, to give medical training, at least the most basic one. They have to understand how to do this. Not just this, it should be a part of mainstream education as well. Now, I remember when we were in school, the only training we used to have was, if there's an earthquake, you have to all run out. If there's an earthquake, you all have to run out in the ground, and no other training was. And that also, I think, was given a training once in 3 4 years. That if there's an earthquake, you just run out to the ground. No other training, how to run out, who should be prioritized. No training of what happens in case of fire and what happens in case of something else. Nothing else. And I'm sure that training also was given because CBSE had given a notice to schools that you should have at least one training in a year. But even then, you don't really have a situation where schools take it as a priority. It's not taken as a priority to be a part of our mainstream education. Our schools and colleges, we are not really told how to behave or how to respond in case of an earthquake or a fire or something else happens. Most of us, for example, most of us, and I'll include myself as well, most of us would not know what to do when, let's say, someone near us has an anxiety attack or an asthma attack. We would not even know how to do the CPR. You know what CPR is? You would have heard it. You would have heard this CPR thing. If so, for example, helping the person breathe by pumping their heart, helping the blood circulation. So again, most of us would not even know these basic kind of things. So it's not something that comes as a part of our education, and we have not even made an effort to make it a part of the mainstream discussion. And that is why there is something that needs to change here as per the second ARC. One of the other things that we have been able to do is have early warning system. Now, you have to give credit where credit is due, especially in disaster management. India has improved leaps and bounds. For example, if you look at the number of people losing their life to cyclones, look at a state such as Odisha. Just a few years back, go back 1 or 1.5 decades, hundreds of people used to lose their life every year due to cyclones. Now we have improved considerably, where handful of people, even in single digits, actually lose their life. So this is something the government has been able to achieve. Number one, by having a much better prediction. Second, giving information to the people at a much faster pace, being able to communicate with the people, sending phone messages, sending radio messages, giving out warning signals so that the people can vacate their house. So early warning system has been deployed in many parts of the country. In Odisha, we see that. In West Bengal, also we see that. People living in the coastal areas now do get information whenever there is a disaster like this about to take place, which has reduced the number of lives lost considerably. Next, citizen centric administration, the next report. Basically, how to make the lives of the citizens better. This is the same report that we discussed when we were discussing Citizens Charter. This is a report where they suggested the Sevottam model. Remember, we discussed the Sevottam model when we were discussing Citizens Charter. Sevottam was Seva plus Uttam. This was a report where they talked about enforcing the Citizens Charter, also asking the people to be open to participation in governance. How? Giving suggestions to the government, not by putting up a box, actual box in the middle of the road that will be stolen, but by asking people to give suggestions. So that can be through, let's say, my gov app. Today you get the my gov app, you can give suggestions. There are government laws, the draft bills where you can read and you can give your own feedback. Recommendation also included having more participation of women and physically challenged. We discussed about this yesterday also. How many women ministers can you remember? How many, or if any, physically challenged member of parliament or minister that you can remember? There's hardly anyone that you can remember. That has to improve. We also have to focus, or the government should focus on grievance redressal. See, it's a very common psyche. If you understand this, when you buy a product, any product can go bad. You buy a phone, you buy an AC, you buy a washing machine, whatever you buy, a laptop, it can go back bad. It's electronics. The difference is when it goes bad, does the company correct it? Do they take the responsibility or not? That is what makes your mindset. If the company proactively corrects it, they take up the complaint, they're ready to change it, then you get an impression in your mind that it's a reliable company, you will be ready to buy that only. Same is with the government. There is no possibility that no one will have any complaint from the government. People will always have some complaint from the government or the other. But the issue here is the government ready enough, or is the government open enough to register those complaints, and is the government actually ready enough to be able to listen and correct those complaints? This is where the government has to be more proactive, not just take the complaints, allow the people to vent out their frustration, and allow the people to actually have a solution from the government. This is the only way in which the people would believe and trust in the government much, much more. The report, or the second ARC, also talked about improving the organizational structure of the government of India. First, government should focus only on core function. Now, what do you mean by this? Basically, what it means is the government should try and use other agencies, try and not interfere in many other businesses, focus only on core function of governance. For example, government has given up Air India. Government should not focus on putting more money into BSNL, these kind of things. Government should focus only on its core functions. Governance, don't interfere in other functions. Let the other functions, or let the other sectors of the economy take care of themselves. Government should only be the facilitator. Government must focus on subsidiarity at all the level. Means, in simple terms, decentralization of power. If you remember, when the COVID-19 crisis was going on, state governments had this complaint from the central government that the central government is deciding everything by itself. They decided vaccine to be given for free. They decided that some vaccines you have to basically pay some money for that. If you remember, when the COVID-19 vaccine was rolled out, if you went to a private hospital, you had to pay for the vaccine. If you went to a government hospital, then you did not have to pay for the vaccine. Remember, there were other categories that were made. The state governments were very unhappy because they were not asked their opinion. In fact, state governments had to pay the money to buy the vaccine for their hospitals. That is something that the government should not do. Government should just subsidize. Means government should decentralize, let the state governments also take their decisions, rather than forcing all your decisions and trying to capture all the power. If a federal country has to be successful, a federal country will only be successful if you have central government that is open to devolving power, devolution of power at the state level. Then analyze the function of each ministry and department. Means again, same thing. If you think a certain ministry or department is not required, rather than this department or ministry existing, rather than it spending the money, the government should rather shut it down or try and assimilate it into other departments. We took an example earlier as well, how if US, for example, has Department of Transport, we have multiple such parameters, or we have multiple such components: railways, shipping, civil aviation, all these are combined, while in other countries it's just transport. You can take one more example of energy. In US and UK, they just have the Department of Energy or the Energy Secretary. In India, we have Ministry of Coal, Power, Renewable Energy, Atomic Energy, so on and so forth. The more you segregate the functions, the more problem has a chance of arising. As we discussed in case of Indira Gandhi government, where the segregation of function was so bad, for even the most basic task of the government, it required 7 or 8 departments to pitch in. And even if one of them is not present, it becomes a problem. Same is the case. I'll give you a very simple example. No port can be successful if you don't have highway connectivity to it. All of you, for example, would have read the story of Hambantota port, how China captured it, right? Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, you would have all heard this, read about this. China gave the money for the Hambantota port to be built. Sri Lanka could not pay the money back, and the Hambantota port basically became a Chinese property for 99 years of lease. You all know that. But there's a background story to Hambantota port. So Hambantota is a very small town in Sri Lanka. It's a town of the Rajapaksha brothers. So Rajapaksha brothers are is like this big family in Sri Lanka, such a big family that at least 10 members of the family are at some point of time in the government. There was a time in the COVID-19 crisis when the prime minister, the president, the finance minister, the education minister, defense minister, all of them were from the Rajapaksha family. All of them were just brothers, son of brothers, and then relatives, all of them Rajapaksha. So Rajapaksha family come from Hambantota. When they were fighting elections, they told the people, vote for us and we will build a huge port in Hambantota. People voted for them, they won the election, they said we will build a port in Hambantota. No one gave them money. It was a stupid idea because Sri Lanka is such a small country. One port is good enough. They already have the Colombo port, it's a huge port, well built up, but they wanted to build one more port. Now, Hambantota port was built up by Chinese money. It had no infrastructure, no connectivity to roads, no connectivity to any big city. So when the Hambantota port was built, a port earns money when ships come. There is import export from that port, but there was no business from Hambantota port happening because there was no infrastructure related to it. Only Colombo port was thriving, and that's why Sri Lanka could not pay back the money. This proves that when you have these departments, shipping, for example, cannot work alone if you don't have connectivity to the port. Railway connectivity, highways are not connected to the port. The shipping industry will not be able to work. So, if you have a project, infrastructure project where you require shipping ministry, highway, railway, all of them to come together, you all require a lot of collaboration, and this becomes problematic when you have so many departments. That is the point here. When you have too many departments, too many ministries looking into different aspects, even if one of them is not on board with the idea, if one of them protests, does not join, does not agree to this idea, the entire setup will go begging. This is what the second ARC says, that evaluate what exactly are the jobs of different ministries and departments. Are they doing their job properly or not? If not, consider removing them. If they are doing their job properly, great. But if they are not, then consider removing them as well. This finally brings us to the end of second ARC. As I said in the beginning, we will not be discussing every report, but we will surely discuss most of the important reports and their important recommendations. I told you earlier as well, there's a very little chance that the UPSC will directly ask you what the second ARC said. Although they have asked one or two times, but it's very rare. Usually the question will be on these topics. Topic of disaster management, topic of conflict resolution is very common in internal security, topic of improving the governance structure. These topics are very common. So these topics, when they come in the mains exam as a suggestion in the answer, this is where you can quote these. Okay. We'll not start the next module today. We'll start the next module on Monday itself. In the remaining few minutes, I will take up your questions. In case you don't have any question, you're free to leave in that case. Okay, I'll now take up your questions. Cheturi saying, who will make changes to the structure of the government of India? Are there any rules for it? See, there is no rule for it. Officially, on paper, the president decides that. On paper, the president makes the rules for the transaction of the business of the government. President, as you know, does not do anything on his own. Prime Minister will advise, the president will make the changes. That's it. Anurag is saying, any chance of question in prelims for secondary RC? No chance, Anurag. No chance at all. See, prelims questions are based on fact, they're never based on suggestions. Because see, what the second ARC has done, they have suggested these things. So the prelims will not be like that. Prelims will be the government has implemented something, law has changed, then the prelim will ask the question. Uh, you too, Sakshi. Bye. Yeah, she's saying what is the core function of the government? So most this is your slide. Yashi, the core function of the government means the government should just focus on policy making, law making, rather than actually running the businesses, rather than interfering. Government should just focus on that. That's the core function. GI saying what are home guards? So GI home guards are kind of like a backup force. It initiated in the 1962 war. In 1962 war, when government thought that our army may not be enough, we would require more people if India requires its defense all of a sudden. So this idea started that we should actually train some people who will be kind of a backup to the army kind of a thing. So and they might be deployed in government positions as well when they're required. They are the home guards. So they're given some physical training, not at the level of army, at a lower level. Arnab is saying, are Byju's magazines enough apart from newspaper reading? Yes, they will be enough. So Lakshana is saying, should we revise monthly magazine two times, or rather should I do test series and PYQ revision? See, so Lakshana, this is a very personalized question. You reading it twice is not the same as someone else reading it twice. Maybe the way that I read, for me, even reading it once is good enough. Maybe the way that you read, reading it five times may not be enough. So it depends on how you read. So there's no one way in which I can tell you read it these many times. That depends on how much you are reading. The end goal is you should be able to solve questions. As simple as that. If by reading it once you're able to solve current affair question from test series, good enough. If you're not, then you have to read it again. As simple as that. So I can't tell you read twice, thrice, four times. It really depends on your level of retention. Prerna saying duration are fixed to release administration reform report. No, Prerna, there is nothing fixed like that. Whenever the government thinks it is necessary, they will form the commission. There is no rule that they have to form it after many years. Virendra saying, please suggest some important magazines for UPSC exam. I would like to start reading them now. Virendra, see, there's no end to those magazines. I would suggest monthly current affair magazines are prepared by many coaching institutes, many good ones. You can read those. It will. Most of the monthly current affair magazines are a compilation of different magazines, so you can do that. But if you really want, if you have a lot of time and you want to read your magazines on your own, then Yojana, Kurukshetra, then there's Down to Earth. All these are good magazines, but again, it will take a lot of time for you to read all of them. Rashida, yes, the class is over. You can leave now. Take care of yourself. If you don't have any questions. Chituri saying, in case of state government, governor will make the change in structure of the government. Yes, Chituri, governor will. Shweta saying, why did the government not consider and implement these recommendations? Shweta, it's not that they did not consider. Every government makes or implements recommendations based on their convenience. If they think that By changing something, maybe we have a better chance of winning elections. We have a better chance of getting more votes. Then they will do that. If they don't think it will change anything, governments usually avoid that, because changing anything means then getting the bureaucracy on board, taking their support as well, changing a lot of things. So unless the government thinks it will really help us, they will not do a lot of changes. That's with all the governments. One other thing that is usually seen is, let's say we have the present government. The earlier government, the ARC was formed by the earlier government, Congress government. So even if the present government likes some of the recommendation, they will not implement it. That's how politics is. That why would I accept the recommendation of a committee that you made? That's also how it usually works. Shweta Sen, did the government implement any recommendation of second ARC? Some of them, yes, as we discussed also, and many of these recommendations are an ongoing process. Understand this. For example, if you look at this, gov- citizens participation in government, now it's an ongoing process. You can't say tomorrow that now I am allowing participation from people. It's an ongoing process. It happens, it takes time. Grievance redress is an ongoing process. Participation of women is an ongoing process. Government will say we have now passed the bill for one-third women reservation, so it's an ongoing process. So yes, some of them have been accepted. uh yeah, she's saying any book for governance. Yeah, she not really. PPTs, current affairs, newspaper is good enough. You don't require any other book. So they're saying, do you think UCC should be implemented? Doesn't matter what I think. See, the UCC in itself has different forms. It depends on what version of UCC are you implementing. So devil lies in the details. So unless you are implementing a law after recommending or after talking to all the stakeholders, it will not work. A few more. Deepshika Singh, if authority wants to do something in their area, they need to ask the state government. Deepshika, I'm not sure what authority are you talking about, and I'm not sure what do you mean by want to do something in your area. It can't be a very generic statement like this. So you have to tell me what exactly are you asking. If it's a law and order issue, yes, the government, obviously, state government would have to be involved. But I'm not sure want to do something, which authority you're talking about. Maybe you can frame that better. Anyway, okay, so I think I'll answer most of the questions that were given to me. I'll end it from my end. SME is still here for you to go and ask questions. The class will still be live for a few minutes. We'll now meet on Monday. We don't have a class for the weekend. You will have your weekend test. Make sure that you do participate. We'll see each other on Monday, 5 p.m. Thank you so much. Have a good day ahead. Enjoy your weekend. Bye bye. Jai Hind.